Good, we're good to go. Excellent. Welcome, councillors, members of the public and staff. I declare the meeting open at 6:35 p.m. It's a meeting of Bayside Council City Planning Environment Committee, 3rd of September 2025. Everyone at this meeting is reminded to conduct themselves in a polite and professional manner, keep communication factual, use appropriate language and tone. Do not use any do not use any defamatory or derogatory remarks. Defamation laws apply to addresses in public forum. I also ask councillors to observe the requirements under the Code of Meeting Practice and Meeting Etiquette. I remind all present that the video recording is an official record of council and may be made available to persons upon request in accordance with the Government Information Public Access Act. No other recordings are permitted. Item 1 is our acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Bidjigal clan, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and work, and acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders, past and present. I've got apologies from Councillor Curry and Councillor Brederhoft. Is there any other? No, that's only two. Have a move that they be accepted, please. Move Councillor Kasim, second Councillor Douglas. All those in favour say aye. Declare that carried. Thank you. There's no leave of absence tonight, and there's no council members in attendance via audio visual link. Item number 3, councillors, is disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures that need to be made tonight? No disclosures noted. Thank you very much. And the minutes of the previous meetings. Can I ask two councillors who are present at the meeting to move and second the minutes? Councillor Douglas, Councillor Barlow, all in favour say aye. Declare that carried. Thank you. There's no items by exception tonight. We do have, is there someone online for the public forum? Thank you. So we'll move straight to that one, which is CPE 25.026, which is the post-exhibition report planning proposal for 204 Rocky Point Road. And we have Mr. Mason Stankovic from Patch Planning. Are you there?
I am, yes.
Excellent. Yeah. Go ahead. We can hear you loud and clear. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. And apologies, I'm there in person at the moment. I'm a little under the weather. Look, I'm just here to communicate our support for the recommendation from council. I think it's a sensible outcome for the site. It maintains appropriate solar to the nearby residents, and it also imposes a design excellence clause, which will ensure quality development ensues in the future. The submissions received were largely about future development that would be dealt with at the DA stage. But as I said again, the imposition of the design excellence clause is really going to be a good outcome for the community, and it's going to put extra emphasis on the need to provide the right development at this site. There's really nothing else from myself. I'm obviously here for questions if there are any, but yeah, I'll close with that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Short and sweet. No problem at all. If we can have a officer, is there a presentation or update, please? Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, councillors, this is just an air photo showing the site up for discussion tonight. It's the one marked in yellow there. So it was part of a larger site that was originally known as a Darrell Lee site, but we're talking about this particular parcel on the corner of Rocky Point Road and Gargarang Avenue on the southern side. So just as background, the site was rezoned in 2016 to a mix of commercial and residential uses. And there was a height plane that was put in place across this site to protect the amenity of the residents to the south. The land was then subdivided and the bulk of it has been developed. There's just the portions on Rocky Point Road that are zoned for more commercial type uses that have not been developed at this point in time. So for this particular site, there was a DA lodged for a 6-storey building back in 2023. It did not comply with the height plane that applies to the site, and I'll show you a diagram of that in a second, and that was since withdrawn. There was then this planning proposal that's up for consideration tonight that was lodged to remove that height plane, and that came to council last year. The officer's view of that was initially that it should not be supported. And then after some discussion, the proponent offered to include the design excellence provisions in our LEP as applying to this site, and that gives an extra sort of layer of control and consideration when DAs come in. So the site we're talking about is the one to the right-hand side of this image, and you can see the red line that runs across the page at an angle there. That's showing you the height plane. So it starts at a certain height and then runs across at an angle, which is there to control the height of the buildings. So the proposal is essentially to remove the application of that height plane from this site, which is just an amendment to a map essentially, and to replace it with two height limits, one being 8.5 metres, which would apply down to that southern end of the site adjacent to the residential properties, and then rising up to a height of 18 metres at Garrigarang Avenue. And also, as I mentioned, to include the design excellence provisions to this site. So design excellence, these are a couple of the clauses or sub-clauses in there that would be of relevance to this site when a development application is ultimately lodged. So the application would be referred off to a design excellence panel, which is comprised of independent architects, and they would consider how any proposal measured up against this clause, and they would ultimately declare whether it achieved design excellence or not, and it wouldn't be approved until it did. So these are some of the considerations that are in there. You can see in 4 there, it looks at the impact on neighbouring sites in terms of separation, setbacks, amenity, urban form, bulk massing, modulation of buildings, and then sustainability impacts, including overshadowing, wind reflectivity, and also looks at landscape design. So I guess the proposition, I guess to summarise it, is that at the moment there's a height plane there which runs from a certain height at the boundary up at an angle, and the intention is that the building would fit below that. The proposal here is to have essentially a stepped height limit that goes part way into the site at 8.5 metres and then steps up to 18, and then to apply this clause to any DA that comes in. So the proposal is really to an extent to replace a fairly sort of rigid, well understood control being a height plane with something in the case of this clause is a little bit more performance based. And I think that's part of the reason why we did get so many submissions on it, because it is difficult. We're essentially passing this sort of onto the DA process to really see whether something meets these performance criteria or not. So there's a little bit less certainty. So council did endorse this just to go to public consultation, which has occurred. That happened earlier this year. So we used to Have Your Say platform, and it has to go on the New South Wales planning portal as well. So that's the number of submissions that we received, and just in terms of the overall sentiment there. So the vast majority of them didn't support the proposed change. So the key issues that were raised were quite a few of them were rejecting to the use, which is the proposal that we saw in the last year was for a self-storage premises open 24 hours. The site was purchased by a company that's in that business, and we understand that's what their intention is going forward as well. The incompatibility of a 6-storey industrial type building with a local residential character, potentially traffic congestion, road safety and parking issues, harm to property values from the development, impacts on amenity, including things like noise, privacy, overshadowing and view loss, concerns around public safety, lack of a community benefit, and also preferences for other uses on the site like retail, medical uses and the like, rather than essentially an industrial building. Just quickly touching on some of those, the use is one that's permitted in the zone, which is an E3 productivity support zone. So it's open to someone to lodge an application for it, and then that would then be assessed against the relevant DCP controls and the design excellence provision that we just mentioned. In terms of the 6-storey building, the character in the area is a little varied. You do have some higher-rise buildings there on the other side of Garrigarang Avenue, some townhouses, and then some single-storey homes around the area. This building would present as a 5 to 6-storey equivalent in height at 18 metres maximum. So it's somewhere in between the range of buildings that you've got in the proximity there. The proposed 80 metre height limit is actually a slight reduction on the maximum that's allowed under the height plan at the moment, which is 20 metres. And again, it would have to go through the design excellence test before a DA could be approved on the site. Congestion, road safety and parking. So there's no proposal to change the floor space, so the intensity of the development doesn't really change. It's just to do with the height of the building or the shape of the building. And again, these things would be assessed against the DCP and design excellence when a DA came in. Property values, not generally a matter that we can address through planning. There are other things on the site that are permitted at the moment that could be of higher impact, like takeaway food. You could end up with a fast food drive-through restaurant there under the current zoning. So this use comparatively is probably fairly benign. In terms of amenity impacts, the use of the site for self-storage will be a fairly quiet use, I guess. There won't be issues with privacy and noise and the like, most likely. And we'll look at those things at DA stage. Overshadowing impacts of the proposed building envelope controls have been modelled. And while there is some impact on adjoining residential properties, they do meet the minimum criteria for number of hours of sunlight received in winter. And again, that would be subject to assessment of a DA when it's submitted and design excellence considerations as well. Crime and public safety. Again, there are controls in the DCP around those things that we'd have to look at when the DA came in. In terms of public benefit, this proposal is only to do with the height of the building, not the uses. So this use is permissible and will continue to be going forward. It would support local residents and local businesses. It's not likely that people will travel a long way to use it, so it is there for local use. And in terms of, there was some comments around demand and supply for these things. Generally in planning decisions, we leave it to the market to decide whether a business is going to be viable or not, and presumably the proponents have done that feasibility assessment. The preference for other uses, the zoning isn't changing, so the range of uses that are allowed on the site don't change. There are other uses permitted, but it's up to the owner of the site to put a proposal forward, and this planning proposal doesn't change that. Just something of relevance, the site shown there in yellow, which is the other site that's zoned for non-residential use at the moment on Rocky Point Road, they did submit an expression of interest to the Housing Delivery Authority recently, and that has been accepted to be state significant development. And that is for a proposal that would be a concurrent LEP amendment and a DA to use that site for 223 residential dwellings, a medical centre and some retail. So if that does go ahead, that would sort of change the character of Rocky Point Road in this area. And there may be an opportunity for council or proponent to consider rezoning 204 Rocky Point Road to be more consistent with what happens to the north there. So the next steps, this planning proposal is at its final stage now, following exhibition. So it's up to council to decide whether it wants to finalise the proposal and support it or not. If council wants to change anything about the proposal, it might have to go back through public exhibition. If it's not supported by council, the proponent has alternative pathways to have the rezoning or have the planning proposal reviewed, or as I mentioned, they could propose something different and approach the Housing Delivery Authority. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Have a mover, seconder, please. Move Councillor Strong, seconded Councillor Barlow. Any speakers?
I've been contacted by lots of residents about this and they're deeply unhappy with the proposal. So I will not be supporting the proposal tonight. I think that the premise of the site being commercially zoning is to maintain employment value, but the storage centre itself would have limited employment in the area. Additionally, with the new zoning of the site further to the north, this would isolate this industrial site in the middle of a housing area. And I think it's more appropriate that this site be rezoned for housing, potentially with mixed retail like the site next door, so that it's one continuous housing estate with great active transport corridor that's going to connect it up to Ramsgate Beach, with the Scarborough Park Master Plan going on, rather than having one big lumpy industrial site in the middle of a residential area. And that's definitely the feedback that residents from my ward have passed on to me, that is their wishes for this.
Yeah, just my comment on that, just for transparency, is that there's no guarantee the proponent will rezone it though, and you could end up with a drive-through KFC on the corner, or any multiple other uses as well. So as long as the residents are aware that, we don't know what the outcome's going to be tonight, but just because it's an option for the proponent, it's a big thing, but it could end up with some higher impact industry on it. And it's I sort of thought it was interesting. Haven't gone down the rezoning path already, but anyway, that's what before us. Councillors Barlow?
Just a question, the original Darrowley office building, now is that staying, or originally way back when Frank Sarter was promoting this site, that had to stay. So is that now going to be residential?
Through you, Chair, but
Permission.
if the site, if
Sorry.
the building was on this particular site, it's not there anymore. This site on 204 is completely, the buildings on there have been demolished. There's just some concrete slabs remaining.
The question too is with the HDA, they can come in, take over the whole site, I assume, and do whatever they like. I mean, the residents should be very worried about HDA coming in and taking control. I'll say that because Bexley North Salvation Army site's going to be totally destroyed if they get their way. And I mean, it's scary. So you're better off taking it in little steps, and hopefully HDA doesn't want the site, but that's the way the developers want to do it now because it's easy.
Can I just ask what you mean by it's scary, Councillor Barlow, to the chair?
Try up to 80 townhouses and apartments on the highest part of Bexley North.
Through the chair, I think this site is already high density and mixed housing, so I don't think it's comparative.
It's the height. At the moment, we've got the height down.
Just your
Put it back to
microphone.
residential. It'll end up being a different scenario. That's all I'm just saying.
Okay. Councillor Strong?
Just going back to that pie chart of the residential support.
What was the percentage of, again, I couldn't quite catch it when it went through, what was the percentage of the public who weren't into the proposal?
I think, yeah.
Mr. Barber?
The proportion that didn't support it was 89%. Supported with changes was 3%. Not supported was 8%. Supported was 8%, sorry.
I've got to say, this is, for me, I'm supportive. This is moving from a line like this to a stage which is a more traditional type of development anyway, which a lot of people are familiar with. The planning proposal is what's being proposed here is known, in that we know who the proponent is and we know what the intentions are at this point in time, and of course that could change. That could change at a moment's notice. It's actually not changing the zoning, so I did have a thorough look at the residents' responses, and my view is that most, if not all of them, are something that needs to be addressed at the DA stage. It's nothing. What's before us tonight is only moving what is a line diagonally to a step up. So it's at the moment, it's if there was a design available that they could design a triangular shaped building, they could still put exactly the same, keep exactly the same usage there. That said, there are opportunities, as Councillor Douglas said, that, hey, we could just, this could be rezoned, but then there's a risk because that's unknown. We don't know whether other entities will be involved and what the proponent will do with that. It's a privately owned site at the moment. So given the design excellence provision, I think that's also encouraging. It'd be exciting to see what can be done with an industrial building on a site like that. But as I said, that would also be subject, not only that, most of the objections from the public I absolutely am respectful of and support. However, it's an objection for a development application when we see it, not an objection. They shouldn't be considered as objections to changing the way, the shape of the airspace, which is effectively what we're doing. So for that reason, I'm supportive. Any other speakers? Councillor Douglas?
Yeah, I think my understanding was this came back to the committee last time when we gave them the chance to take this to public consultation, and I have really deeply engaged with that. And the overwhelming sentiment I'm getting from people is that if council's not going to listen, what's the point in going out for public submissions? So if we're not going to listen, they're going to feel that they're unheard. So as the ward councillor, is my obligation to reflect that and to not vote in favour of this.
Yeah, I completely understand, Councillor Douglas, and I want the residents to know they have been heard because regardless, we haven't voted on this yet, so it could go either way. I honestly don't know. But the residents absolutely have been heard and their concerns have been addressed. There's quite a lot of times I've seen in my time on council where we've had objections which are valid and the planning proposed for whatever reason hasn't been supported or supported with amendments in it. So I completely respect your position. Sorry.
Ask though, then what are we doing to recognise the lack of support from the community if we're just enabling this to go through, if it gets voted through? What do I say to my residents that we have done to recognise their lack of support?
Well, this is a committee making a recommendation to full council. Whatever the endorsement is, whatever the outcome at full council, council law's obligation is to support that decision of council, even if it's against their own vote.
No, I'm just you said they are being heard. So how are they being heard? How are we changing or amending or putting forward something that reflects the decisions, like the input of the community? It's a genuine question.
No, of course. It's been this is my view on reading the report. All of the concerns are not related to planning proposal. They're related to something that would arise as a development application. So when the development application is lodged, it would go through the normal assessment process. This is what's been on consultation. It's not a development application, it's a planning proposal. When we get to the development application, that's when it'll go out for consultation. Here's the plans, here's everything, and that's when we're looking at the proponent will have to address specific matters. And quite often that's when, if it was to get approved, it's approved with conditions or not approved, depending on the process. But given the size of the building, this is certainly not something that's tick and flick. There'd be certainly a lot of engagement at that point, and it'll just follow due process.
And so, just through the chair, would there be a further public consultation process with the new design?
Through your chair, yes, if a development application came in, it would be notified to residents, 14 days for comment. I'd expect that it would go before the local planning panel to be determined. And before that, it would go through the design excellence panel of architects to make sure that it complied with that LEP clause with all those considerations in it.
And with the local planning panel, in addition, if there's 10 submissions, positive or negative, it's automatically forced to a planning panel as well. So that's another layer of oversight before any development application is endorsed.
It's 14 days through the chair is not very long for people to, like I've had lots of people say to me, what's the point in us putting the time into writing these submissions if council's not going to listen? So they will, that we're asking them to, again, spend their volunteer time.
Yeah, with respect, we can talk about this one. We've had there's due process for the planning proposal. This is not a development application. We have nothing, councillors have nothing to do with the development application process. So the residents' concerns have been recorded. It's on the public record for all of us to see, for anybody else to see. The responses have been provided by council officers, and now that's before us for a vote. So if there's a development application lodged, public notification, due process will be followed. If it goes to local planning panel, residents can actually be heard at and speak at the local planning panel as well, face to face with the people making that decision at the time. But the development application is removed. Decisions are removed from councillors, as you're aware. Councillor Kasim?
Just a question. So I presume that all of these resident submissions get given to the local planning panel as well as part of the process. Is that
Councillor
the
Barber,
case?
sorry, Mr. Barber.
Through your chair, these ones wouldn't be because this is to do with the planning proposal. So if the planning control has changed, then that's what is in place when the DA comes in. But certainly submissions that are made to a DA are passed on to the panel.
So is there any way of, because I can hear that, I mean, from the point of view of a resident, they don't know the difference between a planning proposal and a DA and anything else. So, you know, it may be that their objections are not relevant to the planning proposal, but they may be very relevant to the DA. And just aware, as Councillor Douglas has said, that, you know, human beings are time poor and all the rest of it, you know, and could be disheartened as well. So they may not, in fact, engage in a second process, particularly if it's only a short time they've got to do it. Is there any way that council can forward relevant resident submissions to the local planning panel, just as a, you know, really to save them time and as a mark of respect for what they've done?
Through your chair, I think in a report that would go to the panel, a planning panel on a DA, we would probably refer back to some of this background because it's likely that residents will raise it in their submissions again, I would expect. So through that background, I guess the panel could be made aware of it and they could look at it if they wanted to. But I guess with this planning proposal, council's at a decision point now, and if that decision is made to change the planning controls, then they change, and that's kind of the end of that chapter, if you like. With the DA, the residents would have the benefit of a full set of plans, shadow diagrams, traffic studies, the whole lot. So at the moment, I guess there's some, well, nobody really knows what the building might look like. And so the submissions are made, you know, with a lack of certainty there. With the DA, they would have those drawings, probably 3D images, the whole lot in front of them to comment on. So they could make much more informed submissions at that point.
Okay, thanks, councillors. I think we've had ample discussion on this, so we'll put this to a vote. Remember, this is a recommendation to the council, so there'll be further opportunities for any member of the public to speak at that council meeting in due course. So all those in favour of, this is in front of us now. Sorry, it's been moved around a bit. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? No. Could I have a division recorded on that one? We can record your name, Councillor Douglas, against if you like. Is that okay? So if we can just make that on the record, please, Councillor Douglas, against. Oh, if you want to do it as a form, yes, everyone else was for. Sorry, if you want to do it through that way. Yep. That was correct. Yes. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on back into the order of the report through the CPE 25.025, which is an update on new development contributions plan for Bayside. Now, I know there is there's a report that's publicly available and can be discussed. If there are questions that need to be asked or there's after that, we can move into confidential. If everybody's satisfied with the presentation as it is given to us, we can move on. So we'll see how we go after that. So we have an officer's report, please.
Thank you, Chair. If we just go to the next page, thank you. Do I just click the button, Peter? Great. So we're providing an update tonight on the development of the new contributions plan for Bayside. As Council is aware, Council collects contributions from development to help fund the cost of new and upgraded infrastructure to meet additional demand created by development. A contribution plan identifies the area to which it applies, describes the anticipated population growth and development patterns, lists the infrastructure and facilities required to support anticipated growth, specifies the calculation method as well as the contribution rate to be applied to new development, and sets out how Council will collect and ultimately spend the monetary contribution that it receives, or in certain circumstances, works in kind, where a developer proposes to deliver those works identified in the contributions plan. It is a statutory document prepared by council under either section 711 or 712 of the Planning Act. On this slide, we're just outlining what are the eligible uses of development contributions that are received by council. So as you can see on the screen, some of the permitted uses that council can use those funds for upgrades to local roads and traffic management. That can include intersection upgrades, new footpaths, cycleways, open space and recreation, so further embellishment of parks, sports fields, playgrounds, additional landscaping and embellishment works to our open space areas to support new development. It can also be used to fund community facilities such as libraries, community centres and cultural spaces. Drainage and stormwater management, including pipes, detention basins, water quality devices, as well as other local infrastructure such as public domain improvements, signage and lighting. What contributions can't be used for? Water supply and sewerage services, works that don't increase the capacity of infrastructure, and renewal like-for-like maintenance costs and operational costs. So what this slide is ultimately showing is where development occurs within the city that increases the demand on council facilities, contributions can be used to fund upgrades to those or new facilities. I spoke earlier about the different types of contribution plans. So under section 711 and 712 of the Planning Act outlines the difference. Section 11 effectively applies to developments that directly result in an increased demand for services and facilities. So that's a nexus-based plan. So an example of that would be the Walleye Creek Development Contributions Plan being a section 711 plan. When that area was rezoned, it knew the development uplift expected within that area, what facilities and services were required to support that population, and allocated a certain monetary value to those facilities and ultimately to each development unit, each dwelling within that development. Contribution rates are typically capped by the government at $20,000 per dwelling. It can exceed $20,000 per dwelling if council has that contributions plan reviewed by IPART, so the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal, and I believe the Walleye Creek contribution plan is an IPART reviewed plan, and we do levy above the 20,000 cap. Section 712, on the other hand, is effectively a development levy, so it's quite different to a 711. It's used when there's not necessarily a strong nexus between new development and increased demand for services and facilities. And effectively, it's a percentage-based levy on the cost of work capped at 1%. However, it can exceed 1% through a contributions plan, identifying a higher rate, 2 or 3% for argument's sake, reviewed by the Department of Planning and ultimately approved by the Minister. So in Bayside currently we have 7 contribution plans, legacy plans from the former Rockdale and Botany Bay councils. As you can see on the list, a number of them are aged significantly, ranging from 5 years up to 21 years. So there's a number of 711 and 712 plans, and as I said earlier, we do have one contribution plan within the Walleye Creek urban renewal area that is reviewed by IPART and levies above the $20,000 per dwelling cap. Importantly to note, given how many contribution plans we have, the age of those contribution plans, it's been recognised for the last few years that council needs to consolidate those plans into ideally 1 or 2 plans. We're looking at 2 plans with updated development trend information and statistics and census data to reflect the growth and development that's occurring now and is planned to occur over the next 10 years. So this project has been developed in stages. So stage 1 was the development of the options paper, which was a confidential attachment to the report that was prepared in May 2024. That report recommended, and I can speak about this, a 712 contributions plan, a higher rate contribution plan instead of a 1%. We're looking at approximately 3% contribution plan for all development types in all areas of Bayside, except in the urban renewal area in Walleye Creek. And the reason for that is the URA plan, as we call it in Walleye Creek, is a fairly new plan. It's only a few years old. It has been reviewed by IPART and is still fit for purpose. Stage 2 of the development of the new contribution plan is where we're at now, which is the development of the work schedule. So that's been ongoing for the last 12 or so months. Workshops have been held with departments right across council to ensure all community facilities or works that are anticipated to be needed to be provided in the next 10 years have been captured. And that includes works as well as land acquisition items to support development. That's been collected across council, refined by the strategic planning team, and prioritised through meetings with our executive committee. The final cost of those items is currently being estimated by a quantity surveyor. That will then determine, based on the list in the work schedule, how much contributions are likely to be needed to fund that work schedule, or whether we need to further refine that work schedule. Stage 3, which is also underway now, is the actual development of the contributions plan itself. It's a pretty straightforward plan. The work schedule is really what a lot of the work is being spent on at the moment. And stage 4, which will follow stage 2 and 3, is the governance framework and implementation tools which will be prepared. So next steps, in the next 2 months, by October 2025, staff will finalise the work schedule items and evaluate the cost of the items by the QS, as I said earlier, and for proposed land acquisition items by a property valuer. There's about 500 line items that we're working through at the moment. That includes things like road upgrades, intersection treatments, new park upgrades, community facilities, etc. Following that, between October and November, we will hold sessions for councillors to go through the work schedules, so councillors are aware of the work items that are likely to be delivered in the 10-year period of the contributions plan. We're intending then for the draft contributions plan to be presented to this committee in November for endorsement to proceed to public exhibition. That will occur December, January. We're mindful of the Christmas breaks that may need to extend into February. There will be then a post-exhibition report to this committee outlining the submissions that have been received, any recommended changes to the contributions plan, and ultimately endorsement of the contributions plan to enable staff in about March or April to seek the Minister's approval for a higher rate 712 levy. In relation to that, I'll just touch on that briefly. The process to seek a higher rate levy from the Minister for Planning is we'll prepare a report to the Department of Planning with our rationale and the detail contained within the contributions plan. The Department of Planning will assess and make a recommendation to the Minister. The Minister will then make a determination of that plan, and then a regulation to the Planning Act regulation will be required that authorises the higher rate levy. And then following that, the new plan commences and the legacy plans, so the current plans, will then be repealed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a really great summary. You have a mover, please. Councillor Barlow, Councillor Douglas second. Any speakers? Well, just I appreciate, so we can speak to anything that's public information there. I was just checking for myself what the officer recommendation is, and what this is an update on the methodology and progress of the DCP, of the Development Contributions Plan, and the proposed next steps, and that a session be offered to assist councillors in comprehending. So that's what's before us. It was basically an update from council officers on progress. We're not here to interrogate the costs and amounts and all those sorts of things. But that would be next step. So I think it's fair, if anyone has any questions that's in relation to the progress and next steps, I think that's appropriate. Interrogating the amounts and other things is next time.
And just through the chair, if I may, the options report itself is confidential only because it contains information from our consultants that is commercial in confidence information. So the options report itself outlined different ways that council could proceed with developing a contribution plan. We chose the 712 contribution plan as the most reasonable contribution plan methodology that still raises the effectively the same amount of money required to deliver the contribution plan works items. So we've included that as a confidential attachment, so you have all of the information available, so you know where we're up to.
Okay, Councillor Kassim.
Yeah, if I could ask a question though, just with regard to the 711 type of contributions and getting a more than 20,000 cap, allowance given to us. I'm just wondering what research, I guess, has been done on the relative cost of, because it seems to be there's $20,000 per dwelling. There's a big difference between an apartment dwelling and a house dwelling in terms of needs. I mean, like a house dwelling, most houses have got some sort of backyard, for example. So, you don't really need, well, you still need, nice to have parks and things, but you don't need as much public open space because you've got private open space. But public open space is really expensive. So is there any difference allowable in that sense? Is there a capacity to say, because I just know, like, we've just got huge, looking at the numbers coming up around Mascot, even around Arncliffe, Bonar Street, huge numbers of, and they're all red on the diagram. They're all high density, and whether or not there should be in fact more money levied for those sorts of apartments, particularly given that the only way to provide more public open space, one, is by buying land probably, or two, the only way to deal with traffic is sometimes to buy land, and we've talked about that for Arncliffe, for example. But we'll be dealing with things with Mascot later, but these things are really expensive. So that's a question, whether or not there is a capacity to actually ask for more on those grounds.
Through your chair, most of the levies we have now are based on bedrooms, so there is a graduation in the scale. But for most contemporary plans, when you do the calculations, the cost of servicing the smallest dwelling is more than 20,000. So
Yeah.
In case of some councils, it's sort of 50, 60, 70,000, depending on whether it's brownfields or greenfields areas. So the $20,000 pretty much applies to everything because that's the maximum we can charge. Unless, as Wallow Creek was done, you can go through IPART to try and justify higher amounts, which we do have in Wallow Creek. That process is not easy. And the consultants that we're working with specialise in this field. They've done probably the majority of council's contributions plans in the last couple of decades. And their advice to us was that it's a very difficult road to go down. And I think particularly in the current climate where housing is in short supply, I think it's probably difficult to justify a much bigger number than 20,000. And that's why their advice was to go for a 712, but at a higher rate than 1%. That would give us a fair collection rate to sort of justify or to pay for the things that we think we need to provide. But the 20,000 cap has also been in place for I'm not sure how long, a very long time, and it hasn't been indexed. It doesn't change. So it has definitely fallen behind the cost to councils for servicing new dwellings.
Just further to Mr. Barber's comments, in relation to the work schedule, which we'll have a briefing with councillors on in the next month or two, we're identifying where additional open space is needed. We're identifying even where it's difficult to purchase additional open space, but we have open space, but it just needs to be embellished to support a growing population in those areas. We've captured that in the work schedule with a commensurate value that's attributable to that. One of the benefits of a 712 contribution plan levied broadly, universally across the city is we've got a pool of development that occurs across Bayside, everyone paying roughly the same value rate. That then allows council the flexibility through being able to deliver its work schedule items. One of the challenges that we've had to date is being able to wait until you've received enough money, and the 712 plans usually are more flexible, enabling council to deliver infrastructure sooner.
Okay, so it's not possible to do both. I'm like, I guess I'm just a bit worried. I won't know until we see the work schedule, like whether there's intention to purchase some of that land in order to create roads. Because this is the other thing. I mean, there's two things: one, open space, and two, just traffic. With that many extra people, the traffic is going to be a lot more for people. So, and we need to have more roads basically to fix that. And that's
Or
expensive.
active transport corridors.
Or
I can
active
see it on your lips there. I'm with you. I know.
No, or active transport. But I mean, I'm thinking about Eden Street and
Recharging
and everything,
stations.
and it's already we know that around Wally Creek people are banking up on the Princess Highway, so unless land is acquired to allow for road adjustments, which we've discussed in the past. So is that the sort of thing which will be included in that work schedule? And so this will cover it, basically.
Indeed, councillor, and touched on Walleye Creek. We won't get into all the detail, but the current contribution plans already identify acquisition required in Walleye Creek to enable extensions of, say, Gertrude Street through to Arncliffe Street to alleviate some of those concerns at the Brodie Sparks Drive intersection that was reported to council a couple of months ago. So certainly in areas that are subject to significant growth, when the rezoning occurs, it identifies what's needed to support that growth. Where there is land acquisition, the challenge is when the person's properties are identified for acquisition, it's usually on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. And if that person's not ready to sell, then it takes some time before the land's available for that infrastructure to be delivered.
Okay. Oh, well, anyway, you're saying that the 712 will cover the amount required? Okay.
That's where also we have the Rockdale and Mascot master plan in place, for example, that's identifying that. So those master plans, as they're developed and endorsed, then support the building of the acquisition plans and rezoning to say we need this, and then it's just a matter of time, which could be years, could be decades, but that's what and then you've got the pool of funds under 712 that will enable the purchase of that. Those. Okay. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Just a comment. You're saying advertising December, January. Can I advise, don't even think about it, have February in there, because you don't want to be criticised. December, January is holiday time, so make it January, February, because if you're going to do it for 2 months, at least have it in a month where everyone's back at school or back at work.
Good point, Councillor Barlow.
Point taken. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, there's an officer recommendation in front of us. All those in favour say aye. Anyone no? No, I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. Next item, CP 25.027, which is a draft amendment to Bayside Development Control Plan for Westfield East Gardens, which should be topical. Can we have a councillor's update on that one, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. So councillors, just going back a little bit, we've had a planning proposal on foot for a number of years now at Westfield East Gardens. The planning proposal effectively is looking at amending the development controls for a renewal of Westfield East Gardens. The planning proposal is nearing completion. It's council's not the PPA, so the planning proposal authority for the planning proposal. The Department of Planning is. However, given its imminent gazettal, Council's in a position now to move forward on a draft amendment to the development control plan to provide the fine-grained planning controls within the DCP that a future development application will be assessed against. So some site and strategic context. I'm sure everyone's well aware of the location of Westfield East Gardens. It's a 9.5 thereabouts hectare site, fully enclosed multi-regional shopping centre, and under the Eastern City District Plan, it forms part of the East Gardens Maroubra Junction Strategic Centre. So as I touched on, there is a planning proposal on foot to amend the LEP that increases the floor space ratio from 1:1 to 1.8:1. New planning controls for height up to from 25 metres up to between 25 and 59 metres, so the higher buildings on the corner of Bunnerong Road. It is proposed to have a new risk clause included within the LEP in relation to the dangerous goods route that runs alongside the shopping centre, as well as the requirements for any future development applications to exhibit design excellence, as we spoke about with the Rocky Point Road proposal. The planning proposal is intended to facilitate a mixed-use centre featuring a new commercial office tower, a public plaza and improved bus interchange. And as I said, it's at the finalisation stage with the Department of Planning as the plan-making authority. The planning proposal is proposed to have a site-specific DCP clause, so that's clause 6.16. That was excluded originally from the gateway determination, but the advice from the department is that a site-specific DCP can still proceed separately from the planning proposal. What we have asked as part of the post-exhibition requirements from the Department of Planning is they do introduce clause 6.16. A number of our big developments that have been subject to rezonings, we have requested that they be subject to a site-specific DCP. So notwithstanding that this report is about putting a site-specific DCP in, we're still asking for that clause because there is a timing difference between when the planning proposal may be gazetted by the department and when a future development application may be lodged, and ultimately when this DCP amendment is finalised by council. The department is not necessarily opposed to doing this, but has suggested to staff that we do proceed with the site-specific DCP that staff and Westfield have prepared. So the draft DCP controls for East Gardens have been prepared that summarise the vision for the East Gardens Centre, so that identifies in the image on the left where the location of the commercial towers are proposed, where the proposed public plaza fronting Bunnerong Road is located, as well as the improvements to the public domain and pedestrian connectivity throughout the site. It also includes planning controls for building and wall heights, setbacks, active frontages, where awnings and entries are to be located, as well as hours of operation. There are also controls in relation to landscaping and public domain. That includes the new Civic Plaza along Bunnerong Road, improvements to Westfield Drive and incorporation of public art in future development applications. Transport access and movement, including public and active transport through the site, pedestrian access, parking and vehicular access, as well as the road network more broadly. So the next steps are following the council and committee's consideration. It is proposed to publicly exhibit the draft amendments to the DCP over October and November. Council will then consider submissions received during that process and ultimately report back to this committee the outcomes of the exhibition of the draft DCP in February 2026. And if we note there, we are not proposing to exhibit over the December-January period. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Have a mover for that one, councillors. Councillor Strong. Any seconders? Councillor Barlow, second. Any speakers? Douglas.
It's a big roof. Can we ask them to put solar and storage on it as part of the DCP? Would be my first question. Because as we're seeing with the urban renewable energy zone in Botany and Mascot, these are potentially great power sources for the community. And my second question is, it's also a big grey hotspot. Is there some way that we can get some sort of carbon offset for the site in the DCP?
Through the chair, I answer the first part, but I will need to take some elements of that question on notice. But I believe we have general controls in relation to energy efficiency within the DCP. So any development on this site will be subject to those general planning controls within the DCP. That includes things like electric vehicle charging stations on private property. The site-specific provisions are more those fine-grained planning controls that are relevant to that specific site. The development will still have to address those citywide controls, if I can call it that. In relation to your second point,
Well, so to just speak first, so does that mean we can't mandate or ask them to put solar and storage on the site?
no, what I'm suggesting is that the requirements that the DCP currently has in relation to energy efficiency measures are captured within the DCP. I will need to go through in detail, and we can certainly provide that to council prior to the council meeting if we already have those requirements for big developments such as this on a outside the site specific controls. If they aren't in the DCP more broadly, yes, we can discuss that with the proponent and say, given the large roof area, we would like to include some specific controls for this site in relation to solar panels or battery storage, for instance. But I'll need to just check that.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Thank you. And the second question was just around carbon offsetting. So we need a greener bayside, we need more tree coverage, but there's limited scope to do that in such a big, hard surface site with so much concrete. But is there some way that we could have a carbon offset deal so that they're actually investing in tree coverage somewhere else in Bayside to offset this very large heat island potential?
Through your chair, I don't think there's really a mechanism at the moment in place for us to require that. It's something we could discuss with the proponent because we've developed this in consultation with them. It might be part of their corporate objectives, for example, and they're happy to have something put in there. I don't think at the moment, though, we've really got enough statutory clout to require that to happen in terms of carbon offset.
Well, it would be great, seeing as though this is a very bespoke little DCP, that we could try for best practice here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think given that's my concern as well. And there's a smaller development on Botany Road with a shopping precinct where it's just going to be a flat, hot cement. And I think given the fact that they're looking at that Westfield, who let's hope are good corporate citizens, are looking to expand car parks. They're looking obviously the towers, etc. So why can't they make them green roofs, you know, and within that green roof have some solar and some battery storage underneath the greenery, that sort of, and maybe, I know they're developers, let's not just say, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to meet the community expectations for, you know, the way that we're moving, which is we acknowledge it's a big concrete, we don't want to, we can't stop, and we're not going to stop any due process in terms of development, but they can contribute actively to the community. And there's so many examples globally of really amazing green spaces, particularly around Singapore, but there's even some in Alexandria in commercial buildings now that you can walk in these lobbies and it's just this greenery. So it would be really very, very supportive of opening that conversation now. And I think it's going to be not only council, but the communities we represent, where we say, wow, that's something that we could be, it's a shopping centre, yes, we all need the shopping centre. And wow, it's all got its green stuff and batteries and solar. And in the scheme of things, as a percentage of cost in what they're planning to do, it's probably achievable given the long-term nature of it as well.
Chair, I think we can approach them between now and the council meeting and just
Yep.
get their reactions. That we've got a couple of weeks, so we'll do that and let circulate a response back to councillors.
Yeah, and even it could just be here's our principles, here's our design principles for something like that. That'd just get the conversation starting, and we can worry about the detail a little bit later. But if you can understand their principles and if they're open to that, I think that'd be a good start. Yeah, Councillor Strong.
To really push the public art.
You need to press the bottom bit.
Really emphasise that the importance for mental health, and it's such a place where everyone goes for shopping, and the public art, I think, double it. Make it just really push that envelope to make it something really special.
Yeah, again, that can be, I completely agree, and that's around their principles, right? Let's try and, Westfield's been there since the mid-'80s. Let's, if they want to do this, why don't they make it something special? We look at some of the buildings around Green Square, some of them are atrocious, some of them are stunning. Let's make this one of the stunning ones. My question was around, we talked about the landscape and public domain. As a result, when that was built in the 80s, there was still tobacco next door. It's a factory. Now it's the biggest development, one of the biggest developments in the Southern Hemisphere, certainly in Australia. So, and what's missing is the interface between Pagewood Green and this building. You've got that street down the side, which has got a ramp over the top, and the old loading docks, which aren't really used anymore. So I'd really like to understand how Westfield can improve that interface, and it could be through really effective landscape design. And when we first looked at Pagewood Green in first talked about 2015, there was this big park from Jellicoe all the way through that actually ended at Westfield, and that was really great, but it ends at a brick wall, and it still does. So now it's great they're looking at the public plaza on Bunurong Road. We absolutely need that. There's so many school kids now who are coming from the southeastern suburbs working their way north to school. So it's very, very crowded and congested. How does that then go around the corner to help people access that shopping centre without going to the streets on the ends, which is the eastern or the western entrance? How do they come in through the site? So if you could open up that conversation again, I think that'd support an overall design concept.
And through the chair, just on that, it's a very good point. So we do have a new Control 13. It's on page 16, I believe. And that's really trying to improve the connectivity from the north into the site. Obviously got Westfield, I think it's called Westfield Drive.
Yeah.
And so the requirement for a public domain plan as part of their redevelopment. So obviously the planning proposal identifies broadly what they're thinking about as part of where the towers will go in the redevelopment. They might choose to do it in a slightly different way when the DA ultimately comes in, but what we want to see is significantly improved public domain and pedestrian connectivity from the high density developments to the north into the site. So we'll certainly have those conversations with the proponent going forward as well.
That'd be great. And the number one issue at the moment with Westfield, shopping trolleys. And I know they always want to blame the big three supermarkets that are all anchored there, but we're a tenant as well. And the way that the increase in population, I think the number of trolleys has doubled, and the reason they're doubled is because half of them are left on the street. And I don't know how the proponent can control that, but it's the absolute number one issue that we need, that I think is an opportunity to address as part of this.
Oh, and through your chair on that, we'll double check what the DCP requires. There are ways of addressing that through, obviously, what a lot have the coin lock, but GPS shopping trolleys that effectively the wheels lock. You cannot leave a geofenced area. The trolleys will literally lock. So including requirements in the DCP, I believe they're in there, but I'll have to check in relation to supermarkets more broadly across the city to see if that is a requirement that we can include site specific to help address that issue.
That'd be really great, because it's never going. If Westfield's going to expand, it's never going to go away. We're going to have more office workers there. We're putting up. They want to put up towers. They want to put up entertainment precinct. They want to put more cinemas. They want to attract more people, more business, more turnover. Completely get that. But that's where the corporate citizenship comes in to say, well, we've got thousands of people around you, and how do we make this a better place and be proud of what we're doing? So I don't know if they've got a conscience like that at a corporate level, but certainly we do as councillors.
That is a Westfield with solar panels.
Oh, yeah.
all over.
They know how to do it. So, but it's not green. I want green on top of that. Can you put green on top of solar? That'd be a challenge, wouldn't it?
Turf underneath, and I do know there is a company in Sydney that deals specifically
Anyway.
with green roofs and solar, and the green roofs do make the solar more efficient.
There you go. See, we've already done the research.
good segue to the next item.
Cool. So, councillors, got the officer's recommendation in front of you. All those in favour say aye. Yeah, I'll declare that carried. Thank you. Yeah, the segue to the next one, Councillor Strong, is CPE 25.028, response to the notice of motion, rooftop public rec space. Got a councillor's report on that one, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Okay, so this report is in response to a notice of motion, which is up there on the screen, and that was essentially that council investigates options for requiring major industrial and commercial development to provide publicly accessible rooftop recreation areas. So just some thoughts on that. When we're planning for community facilities, and we've just heard about the contributions plan, we do identify those needs in advance through analysis and studies, and they are often funded through developer contributions. And the new hub in Arncliffe Central is an example of that. That was identified through a social needs study and then factored into the contributions plan, and now that's coming to fruition. So we can act on opportunities as they come up, but they do need to be based on some sort of an analysis of need and demand, and also within council's operational capacity. So it's something that we could do selectively, but it's difficult to plan for because we're never really sure when these opportunities might come up in private development. So the types of land uses that you might get on a particular site can vary. As we've seen with Rocky Point Road, it could be self-storage, it could be fast food, very different types of building and development. And the timing of it is also unknown to us. Private landowners will develop whenever it suits them in terms of their business. So it's difficult for us to plan community facilities not knowing how development will roll out over time. We don't have any legal mechanism to require it in developments. We can seek opportunities, but it's not something we can mandate. There's just no legal basis for us to do that. Some rooftops are not really suitable for public access and recreation due to safety concerns or access through the building or the site or their location. A lot of commercial and industrial buildings are in industrial areas, which after working hours are often quite deserted, fairly quiet. Public transport sort of switches off, and they're not necessarily safe areas to attract the public into. Next one. In terms of operational challenges, to have public access through private property would be challenging. You'd really want to have separate access, so separate stairs and a separate lift for accessibility, which makes them more expensive. We'd have to resolve how they're managed, if there's bookings for, if they're courts, sports courts, for example, cleaning, maintenance, insurance, security arrangements as well, how behaviour is managed, given that they're on top of somebody else's building. There's potential for conflict, particularly residential, which was not mentioned in the notice of motion, but residential buildings are obviously more sensitive than commercial and industrial buildings, which are generally empty at night time. The visibility and accessibility of rooftops, educating public to know that they're there and they're publicly accessible would be a challenge. When we provide courts in a park, for example, people can see them and it's obvious that it's a park and they can go there and use it. In terms of cost, buildings are not generally designed to have these things on top, so there's a requirement there to make sure that they're structurally adequate. For example, warehouses often have metal roofs, which are not designed to take any load, so they'd need to be concrete slabs or something else instead if they were to have public recreation on top of them. Roofs are sometimes used for solar panels or for green roofs as well, so it's a question of priority there. We do have data centres and those sorts of things emerging in Bayside because of the good connectivity to internet infrastructure. They're very energy hungry buildings and they often like to cover their roofs in solar panels. So there's a choice there. If we were going to encourage public recreation, you can't kind of have both necessarily. And we also do have Ausgrid's community battery program rolling out as a trial in the Botany Mascot area, and they're looking for large roof areas to host solar panels to make that program work. On the planning side, under the current zoning in the LEP, these types of things are defined as a use in the LEP and they're only allowed in certain zones. So generally in the industrial zones, they're actually a prohibited use. And the intention of that is not to allow commercial recreation facilities in those zones, but to keep them for industrial use. There's some other zones mentioned there, but planning permissibility is a bit of a challenge for this type of thing. So options going forward, we could look at planning agreements to deliver public benefits like this. We do use them for other types of public community facilities or for cash sometimes, but we can get facilities as well. So we could look at opportunities for rooftop gardens or courts or community spaces on top of buildings. We can't require developers to offer us a planning agreement. It's something that is by negotiation, and they're generally only offered up when there's extra potential being added to a site. So it's a sharing of that uplift between the community and the proponent. So the opportunity for those is fairly limited. Councils would only see a couple coming through, a year at most. So there's not a lot of them around. Hosting public facilities on top of a building is, for the reasons I've just talked about, it may not be that attractive to developers just to manage having other people on their site and that sort of thing. So we can suggest it, but we can't require it. And those agreements come to council and go on public exhibitions, so councils would be involved in that process as well. The image there shows courts on top of a building in Pyrmont. In this case, it's actually their library and community facility, so the public, the management of those courts is easy because there's other community facilities run by the council on that particular site. So it's definitely possible, but under that model, it's a lot easier to manage. Another opportunity would be to offer a density bonus in exchange for these type of rooftop recreation facilities. There are other councils that do offer, not necessarily on the rooftop, but do offer increased floor space in return for community facilities. I guess the downside of that is you need to allow a bigger building to get the public benefit back in return for that. So there's an offset there for the community to accept larger buildings. The planning controls that we have are based on analysis, and so just to add extra levels onto a building to achieve public recreation facilities, there's a risk that you're undermining the work that led to the controls that are actually already in place. And in a lot of cases, those controls are already optimised, and so it would be difficult to offer developers more on top of what's already allowed. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Cover mover, Councillor Kassim.
Thank you.
Seconded, Councillor Barlow. Councillor Kassim.
Thank you. Thank you for looking at all of that. I guess my wondering is about the either or nature of some of the comments. So, like we've just looked at the fact that it may be possible to put solar panels and then to have something else underneath it. That would be like the best of all possible worlds as far as I could see. So that may be possible. The fact that another council is actually offering incentives for developers, I think is interesting. And I guess thirdly that yes, if you're right in the middle of an industrial area, people are unlikely to go. But we know that a lot of our industrial areas actually do abut residential areas. I mean, Mascot is a case in point. Literally, it's just like one side of Kent Street's residential, on the other side isn't. It's actually close. And so things which happen close to where residents are could in fact be quite popular for residents, especially because it's so high density, and people have limited opportunities otherwise. So I would prefer not to have it discounted, like that, and I guess I'm in favour of seeing whether or not it is possible to give incentives to people to do exactly what I said up front, and that is solar with recreation underneath it. because that would be the best of all possible worlds. And yes, I agree. Most residents don't want bigger buildings, but if they got something out of it, you know, they might actually be better disposed towards it.
So are you proposing any change, Councillor Kasim, or what? I appreciate your comments.
Yeah.
What
So receives and notes because I'm going to
Because-
incorporate.
this, if we're moving into, if you're moving into incentives, it's a completely different realm
Yeah.
of planning controls, and it's not something we're going to resolve here with this motion.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, as even tonight we've talked about, as you say, there have been sites like, I mean, the Cogra site is actually in a residential area, so surely the residents would like some sort of something there. You know, is an example of it. The East Gardens example is a commercial site, which, again, I'm sure if there was recreation on top there, residents might appreciate that. So I'm not sure what wording to put there, but it really is to, maybe it is to investigate or to propose ways, even just not to investigate, you have investigated, you know, to propose ways of implementing you can improve the wording, but developer incentives to having
To summarise the recommendation, it's that the council considers opportunities to incorporate community facilities. So again, I understand the intent, but if you're looking at planning changes and incentives, that's hugely topical, and it's not the appropriate place to add it to something like this, because increased incentives for developers are hugely controversial, and to add it to this is a response to a question. Yeah, it's not that's a completely different thing that you're asking for, and this is just a response to your notice of motion to say that, and I mean it's there, so I don't.
So what would be the mechanism for doing that?
You'd have to, I would suggest a new notice of motion separately if you want to talk about incentives for developers, but that's not hugely supported by councillors, if I can tell you off the cuff. I certainly don't support them.
Okay.
It's not, I'm just trying to, we can't have scope creep to a response to a notice of
Fair
motion.
enough.
So
I mean, it's a good study, but I think the one thing where you said it's either solar panels or recreational, that's the gold thing. Where, as you're saying, you can have the a little bit raised up the panels as shelter, and then mixed recreation underneath.
Yes.
Some of the roof without solar panels and greenery, and it just seems like a great design idea to explore.
Let us make a comment
Councillor Barlow?
then. Speaking to people that are in, I live in Walleye Creek, I don't know, I mean, I've seconded it, but I don't know how it would work when it means that the person that's buying into the strata has that cost, because who owns it? And this is what came out of this lady who lives in Walleye Creek. She said, I wouldn't let people from the public come into my building because we've got the insurance, there's all these things. So if it was part of the planning proposal or whatever, it might be different, like Pagewood Green. I don't know who owns all the land on the side. Is that part of the, like the basketball court?
council owns a lot
Council
of it, but
owns all
Strata
that.
maintains it.
Yeah, but Strata maintains it. So that was a really good
Outcome.
development and a good outcome. So you've got to look at it that way. So I think there's a lot more to be looked at. I don't know who negotiated the Meriton, the Pagewood Green, but General Manager might know.
Look, I think that actually was something that council at the time gave staff a really clear indication that they wanted to have the open space, but not the maintenance and the obligations that came with that. Through the chair, if I could just also comment, I think point 2, as it's written in the recommendation, doesn't cut off any opportunities for negotiating one specific site at a time to see if there is any possibility of incorporating some of the facilities that you've been speaking about tonight. That's very different to changing the whole planning framework and trying to get, that extra density and the other planning considerations that would relate to something where we started to talk about incentives. But on a one-on-one basis, point 2 does allow the staff to open up those discussions about solar, about green roofs, about recreation facilities. It's keeping the door open for that as opportunities to become available. And yes, it's voluntary on the part of the developer, but that's the planning environment in which we operate.
Okay. I mean, could we maybe just strengthen it then, council prioritises consideration of opportunities to incorporate?
We say council.
Where in areas with limited community facilities, council prioritises opportunities to incorporate.
Yeah, and we could take considers away and put explores.
Yes.
If I
Like make
may-
it a little bit more
Yeah.
active.
Yeah.
I respect the intent of the question and completely understand that there's a huge complexities in delivering in delivery, and then even if you start talking about areas, well, define the areas. What areas? Like we have to be, as councillors, we have to be very strategic and provide that strategic direction. We can't get operational and start to look at the nitty gritty. So I think it's written so broadly that the way that I would approach it, if there was some sort of stalemate, if there was a VP on the table and we came to a stalemate, here's a lever. I'd say, hey, this is an icebreaker. Here's a couple of options. Let's continue the conversation and maybe we can meet you halfway somewhere along that. That's the way I would see it at this point.
Yeah.
But it doesn't limit further when we're looking at even individual development control plans or LEPs later on. It doesn't actually limit the scope. I think it's broad enough to say council would like these conversations to be had, but actually you're not actually limiting too much scope either. It's,
no, I don't
it's providing councillor officers with flexibility to have the conversations.
Yep. Okay.
Does that make sense? Is that fair?
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, councillors, all those in favour of the the recommendation in front of us, say aye. No, I'll declare that carried. Thank you. And the last one for this evening is CPE 25.029, another response to a notice of motion, Bayside Heritage Study. If you can have a officer's summary on that one, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, this is another notice of motion, and there it is on the screen. So that was for us to look at options for a heritage review across a broader, or the whole of Bayside, and also a local character assessment as well, and to look at some of the costs that might be associated with that. So just to start off with a couple of definitions. So we use in this report terms including heritage strategy. That is just a higher level strategic direction, or like a roadmap, if you like, that would sort of set out how council's going to approach heritage conservation in Bayside. So there'd be a number of actions and priorities that would come out of that. A heritage study is a much more detailed piece of research. So it's actually looking at places and buildings for their significance, usually undertaken by heritage experts. It involves research, site visits, desktop reviews and that sort of thing, that ends up providing guidance on how particular areas or buildings could be managed. So a much more fine-grained, detailed piece of work. In terms of context, we do have our local strategic planning statement that does have some references to heritage conservation in there and things that council has undertaken to do. Priority 10, you can see there is to value, protect and conserve Aboriginal heritage, and 11, establish clear development controls for heritage items, adjoining sites and conservation areas. And further down through the actions, it does talk about finalising the Bayside Heritage Strategy, which is that higher level roadmap that would then define the actions and priorities that would flow from that. That piece of work has not been completed since the LSPS was adopted by council. And so that's a piece of work that we could continue on with. There's been quite a few studies done over the years. This table's in the report, difficult to read on the screen, but they date back into the 90s, early 90s. And most recently, there's been some reviews of those studies to sort of go back through that information, and they did result in 4 heritage conservation areas being added to the LEP a couple of years ago, and also new heritage controls being put into the DCP. But there's other recommendations that haven't been finalised, including adopting the heritage strategy, as I just mentioned. So in terms of the notice of motion and the suggestions in there for a heritage review of the whole local government area, there's 2 options there. So this is the study option, so the more detailed option could be done to 2 different levels still. One is a higher level, which is essentially a desktop review. So going back through those older heritage studies and looking at other material that's available to flag areas that might be worthy of more detailed study. That would be updating what we currently have and recommending areas for further review. The cost of that would be in the order of 150 to 250,000. The second option there is to do a more detailed heritage study or heritage review, and that would include more in-depth research and site visits to have a closer look at buildings and individual areas, and that would give you a more comprehensive and detailed deliverable in terms of buildings that should be listed and the like. That would cost between 250 and 300,000, or potentially more, depending on how much was identified requiring further investigation in that process. Heritage studies do vary in scope depending on the methodology and how much you want to drill into the analysis, and so we need to clearly define that scope to get an accurate costing for that. It would need to be outsourced. We have a heritage advisor on staff part-time, but certainly not enough resource to do a whole LGA heritage review. So some of the key variables that would affect cost there are the coverage of it, whether it's the whole LGA or just areas that we've identified as having higher potential for heritage conservation. Whether we're reviewing listings that were suggested in previous studies or looking at the whole area afresh. And just the level of research, whether it's based on a neighbourhood or just general themes in terms of eras or types of buildings. Also, inclusion of policy and management recommendations, whether it goes down to the detail of actually recommending what happens next in a lot of detail or just makes general observations and recommendations, and the extent of site visits and documentation that goes with it. To do the whole LGA, you could take a staged approach because it is a big piece of work and that could be done over a number of years. So what could come from that would be changes to the planning controls, so amendments to the LEP to list individual buildings or to create new heritage conservation areas, and they would be justified based on the study that was done. That planning control amendment process would generally takes 12 months or longer. There's got to be a fairly high standard of information collected and supplied to the Department of Planning to justify listing buildings in LEPs, because it's a fairly formal level of protection. And that is all very rigorously reviewed. And the Department of Planning and the Heritage Office will look at recognising properties irrespective of ownership. So these types of exercises are looking at the places in the buildings. In the past, certainly Rockdale Council had a process where they would ask owners if they wanted to be on the list or not, and if they didn't, their properties were removed. That approach would not be accepted by the department. A building is either worthy or it's not, regardless of who owns it at the time. Local character statements, that was the second part of the notice of motion. There was proposals back in 2020 and 21 to include local character clauses in LEPs. In fact, it did get to the point of being put out for public consultation, and these are really going to be statements that identified the character of an area, so that could be then captured to guide development into the future to be consistent with that character. So it wasn't progressed beyond public exhibition. It was really abandoned by the Department of Planning. Some councils do have character statements in their DCPs or just separately, They don't have any legal weight under the planning framework at the moment because it didn't progress to putting provisions in LEPs to recognise them. So really to protect, for heritage conservation, if you want to increase the level of protection that we currently have, it really needs to be done through a heritage study and then LEP amendments to list buildings, and then controls also in the DCP to detail how those buildings are managed that have been recognised. So our conclusion, a full LGA-wide heritage review we don't feel is required at the moment. There was work done in 2019 and 2020 to review the documents that had already been produced. Instead, our recommendation is that we go forward and finalise the heritage strategy, and that will set out a roadmap that council can endorse as to how it wants to go forward with further heritage conservation protection. So that will define those objectives and priorities, and then we can set about working to short, medium and long-term actions there, whether there's particular areas that are identified for further detailed study, or what approach council wants to take. I guess our view is that would be a better approach than doing a $300,000 plus whole LGA study at this point in time, just to sort of pause and finish that strategy and then have that as council's roadmap going forward. That's because the strategy is very high level and it doesn't involve research about individual buildings or suburbs or the like. It's something that we could finalise reasonably quickly, get back to council for adoption, and then council can decide how it wants to prioritise further work from there on. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Do you have a mover, Councillor Douglas? Second, Councillor Kassim. Councillor Douglas.
I've just wondered whether we need to make the recommendation clearer to say that the council, point 3, that the council will proceed with a heritage strategy to be delivered, I think you've mentioned today, in the first quarter of 2026.
Yep.
Is that reasonable?
Yeah. We could pull that to
Just commit to add the date, just to commit delivering the study by
Yeah.
whatever.
That date.
Yep.
February, March.
What's reasonable? What's achievable?
Yeah, Chair, a lot of the work is actually done. It just needs to be updated and consolidated. So yeah, first quarter of next year is realistic for us.
So if we say within 6 months, is that fair?
So you're not
Councillor
changing
Douglas?
3, you're changing 2.
No, we're adding
Oh,
3.
we're adding 3,
Okay.
just to make it clear that
The council complete the Bayside Heritage Strategy within 6 months. Is that okay, Councillor Douglas?
yeah, that's great. And then I do wonder whether is it necessary to have that the council then reconsiders whether a heritage review proceeds?
Well, can we just maybe just make
Yeah, through each of that would
provide
be
options?
articulated in the strategy. So we'll
Yeah.
probably come back to you with what we think are the high priority areas to do that detailed work on, and that can be phased over a period of time, or depending on how council wants to commit to it in terms of financial resources.
Yeah, so that'd come back to us, Councillor Douglas, Council Committee and Council, with some options and recommendations for further discussion.
Okay, so a heritage review is implicit in a heritage strategy?
Yeah, we give you the roadmap for how those more detailed studies could be rolled out.
Okay.
And then I would suggest that when that comes to us, it says, here's your 5 options on, here's what it all means, and here's the options, and councillors give us the direction that you want to go, and that's the debate at the time. And that'll include some sort of costing as, like, probably built on what's already written in here, is the way that I would see it working. Is that correct? Yeah.
Can I just ask one follow-up question? I did have a question from the community about concerns about individual homes being, how do we get how do individuals or community members get residential houses onto the Bayside Heritage List?
Through your Chair, it is generally done through heritage studies. So they will look at particular streets or suburbs in some detail. People in that work will then go on public exhibition before anything's added to the LEP. At that point in time, people can advocate for particular properties to be added, but whether they are added to the LEP or not really depends on that heritage study, and there's different criteria they're looked at in terms of significance, social significance, technical, whatever it might be, to sort of support them. So it may be that people suggest items that are not worthy of being listed, for example. So yeah, by all means, I think the time would be when those studies are being done. There's not really a process to just add one or two in an ad hoc way.
Okay, thank you.
And can I, with the community members, are they talking about their own property or other people's things?
I think.
Because I mean, yeah, there's probably a big difference. Hey, I've got this beautiful home. I want to make sure it's preserved for eternity. Versus, oh, that's a beautiful house. That should be lit. Yeah, you know what I mean. So, the heritage study will help us inform that. But maybe if we're getting those sorts of questions, we can say, hey, there's different options. Cool. Okay, you okay with that, Councillor Douglas?
Attitudes have changed since 1991.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, councillors, no further questions on that one. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. And there being no further items, I'll close the meeting at 8:10. Thank you. I'll give you 45.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience. Commencing the City Works and Assets Committee on the 3rd of September 2025. Welcome councillors, members of the public and staff. I declare the meeting open at 8:22 p.m. Everyone at this meeting is reminded to conduct themselves in a polite and professional manner, keep communication factual, use appropriate language and tone. Do not use any defamatory or derogatory remarks. Defamation laws apply to addresses in public forum. I also ask councillors to observe the requirements under the Code of Meeting Practice and Meeting Etiquette. I remind all present that the video recording is an official record of council and may be made available to persons upon request in accordance with the Government Information Act 2009. No other recordings are permitted. I would like to acknowledge the Bidjigal clan, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and work, and acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. We have one apology tonight from Councillor Curry. Move in second. That Councillor Kassim, Councillor Morrissey. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you. Do we have any attendance on audio-visual link? No, we do not, so we can pass over there. Disclosures of interest. So I have put in a disclosure of interest already, which I don't know if I need to read that out. I do. Okay. On the post, I could turn my neck that way. On the post-exhibitions report, Scarborough Park Master Plan, less than significant non-pecuniary conflict of interest regarding the Scarborough Park Master Plan, as I established the Camo Greenway working group but no longer convene it, and they made a submission to the Have Your Say. Thank you. Anybody else make a? I will stay for voting on the matter. Does anybody else have a conflict of interest? No, great. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can I ask two councillors who were present at the meeting to move and second the confirmation of the minutes? Councillor Barlow and Councillor Morrissey. Thank you. Okay. All those in favour say aye. For that carried. Okay, so we'll go on to the first item, which is CWA 25.032, the response to notice of motion, Major General Williams Home Memorial revised design options and costings. Do we have?
Thank you, Chair. There is a very short presentation on this one. Thank you. If we can move to the next slide, please. So, councillors, you'll recall that a couple of months ago we brought forward a very minimalist design for the area surrounding the memorial to General Holmes. And you'll recall that at that point we did advise that General William Holmes was the engineer in charge of building General Holmes Drive. He was the road builder. I think it's important just to have a stop and have a look at that photo, because what it isn't clear to everyone, unless you know the site really well, is that the plaque actually faces the road. It's right up against the footpath and faces the road. And the little bit of green space is actually behind the plaque. So what we're doing is actually putting something surrounding and behind. There's nothing in front apart from footpath. The other thing to mention there is that it's very poor quality soil. It is sand, effectively. And it's something, when we look at the pricing for what will be required for the entire park, a lot of that is because of the soil that would have to be taken away from here and the new, better quality imported into the site. It does look rather like something in Rookwood, don't you think, when you look at it from that angle? It's not, it's quite an interesting memorial. Next slide, please. So just to remind you, sorry, if you can go to the next slide, just to remind you, that's the location that we're talking about. at the intersection of General Holmes Drive and the Grand Parade, or as we call it, the Little Grand Parade. Next slide. This is just a reminder of what we had submitted the last time we spoke about enhancing the memorial with some plantings. And I think at that time, we're talking about a very modest amount, up to $5,000. We have cleaned off the memorial itself. We have redone the gold lettering on the memorial. So that was a small budget then for the landscaping planting around the memorial itself. Next slide. So, slide. Two more. Okay, this one. Back one. So, there we go. So, on the basis of the request from council last April, when you saw the plan that we'd put forward, we were asked to go back and work up, I think, a more comprehensive plan for that entire area, that triangular area. So what we've come back with and what you'll see attached to your report tonight includes quite a lot more landscaping. It includes pathways to allow people across a desire line to go across the centre part of the park. It enhances that curve around the memorial, so you can see there's quite a large piece of hard landscaping there, so that would be able to accommodate potentially seating, interpretive signage, a range of things that were incorporated into the council resolution. The point, though, to note is that there is a substantial increase in the cost, and the estimate is somewhere upwards of 180,000. Now, that is in part because of the extent of the works, but also, as I said, because of the poor quality of the soil in that area, the amount of landscaping that would have to be done to accommodate any plantings.
Thank you. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that item? Councillor Poulos and Councillor Barlow. Are there further discussion?
Yeah, so I'd like to start off by saying thank you very much. I think what the council officers have come back with is quite a significant difference. It's taking into consideration the location. It's creating a little bit of a sort of better sort of outlook, a bit of a sort of place where you can come and reflect and actually consider what was or who and why the road is named after General William Holmes, and sort of creating a little bit of a sort of a location where you can come and reflect. So I just, what I wanted to do is to add a couple of points if that's okay. So I'd like to add that council endorses the revised design. So actually,
That's actually point 2.
yeah. So taking the first point off, if that's okay. And moving. That the project be incorporated into the 2026 and 27 budget and operational plan. That the project be incorporated into the 2026-27 budget and operational plan. And that number 3, that the open space parcel of land be recognised as Major General William Holmes Memorial Park. William Holmes. So it's Major General William Holmes.
Through the chair, for the last point there, that would need to read that council makes an application to the Geographic Names Board
Yep,
to have the park named
that's
Major
fine if
General.
we can do that. Applies to the. Thank you.
Just can I just say, I looked up this General William Holmes on Wikipedia, which is not necessarily the source of all truth, but it doesn't mention anything about him having built the road. It's just a long Anzac kind of commemoration there. So, did I mishear that?
No. The research that we were able to do through our local studies library, which we supplied at the last time council considered this, is that he was in charge of the organisation. I think it might have even been, I'm going to say the water board, when they actually built the road. He had returned from the war and he was the chief engineer responsible for the building of the road. He wasn't a local resident. He didn't have a particular local connection other than that he was in charge of the organisation that built the road.
I think we might want to fact check that because it says he died at the Western Front in 2017. Yeah, so might want to double check that. I mean, I think if just looking at Wikipedia, like the significant Anzac history here, is there an opportunity for us to approach the local RSL clubs to see if they could make some sort of contribution? Because this is quite a large budget for a small space that, whilst it has a memorial value, will have limited recreational value. It doesn't necessarily provide a heap of green coverage either because it is, so it doesn't have a massive ecological value. But if we could make it a recognition of the Anzac contribution through some sort of contribution from the RSL clubs, it could help with our budget a little bit.
We could certainly try. I wouldn't think that the RSLs obviously come to us looking for support.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's probably a long shot that they're going to contribute to this.
Okay.
And just by way of, sorry, I should have clarified, he did die on the Western Front,
Yeah.
but he was in charge of the organisation. That was his civilian role
Okay.
that built the road. He was absolutely responsible for the building of the road.
We should definitely add that into Wikipedia when council staff have got time.
Just add it to point 4.
Councillor Kassim.
Thank you. I guess when this first came up, I was really, I like the idea of having something which, like a sort of a gateway splash to the LGA, something which looked good. As the conversation and the research and everything's gone on, I've just wondered, like, is this guy really? I mean, he's already honoured. He's got a whole jolly road. Like, how many of us have a road to our name, And he's not even a local resident. I feel like if we're going to name a place, like it should be like Kamei Park or something, like it's like recognising more that this is, Aboriginal land, and this is, I mean, that's sort of like, that's local significance. That's the local significance, is that this is the land of the Kamei people. It doesn't, as I say, the fact that he's not, if he was some brilliant local person, I'd be probably a bit more favourably disposed. But I reckon he's honoured enough, really, and so I'm just wondering if there's something else we can do. And I feel so sorry for council because you've done these beautiful plans, but they are really expensive And when I look at that, $180 to $300,000, I mean, I wonder about whether you get public art for that much money. You know, like there must be some other thing you can do with that much money, which would provide the splash, which is what I think we all want, and something to welcome people to Bayside, really, rather than rather than spend like up to $300,000 really on putting soil where there isn't supposed to be soil. You know, I mean, it's a sand. Yeah, I mean, like it's not actually meant to be a garden. You know, and especially because people are unlikely to sit there. You know, because it is so busy. Like it's a major road. You know, like if I wanted a space to reflect, I'd go down to the beach. You know, like I'm not gonna sit in the park. So you know, we're talking about seats and all that sort of stuff. But I think the only people who might sit there are people who are just too tired as they're walking back to their car or something. But apart from that, I guess I'm a little bit uncomfortable about the amendments made in terms of, you know, endorsing this for the operational plan and spending this much money when all I really want is a nice splash to welcome people to Bayside, which might be able to be done by some alternative means.
Thank you for your sentiments, and I appreciate your feedback. But I think that it's part of, and yes, it is a commemoration of who he was, the contribution he has made to Bayside. But I think it then goes that next step is that we've got a barren memorial there at the moment that looks like it was extremely derelict when I first noticed it, and it has actually been tidied up, and I commend the staff for the initial attempts that we have actually made. But I do believe that it is a part of beautification of the city. So I stand by my my points. Well, it's up to though, so it's not that it actually is drop in the ocean with when we come in. You know, when it comes in comparison to a lot of other works that we're doing within the city, it is despite your comments, it is a very high traffic area. There are people that are walking up and down. Little Grand Parade is, you know, and it is at the start, so it is something that I do believe will be used. And yes, it is on the main road, but it will be, you know, what the staff have actually put together is quite an attractive and somewhat serene sort of setting. So that's where I sort of feel that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm on the fence with this one. I think I like the terminology that it's a splash, and because it's such a high profile area, but it's such a big cost for a relatively small space, and that's the sticking point to me. I don't know what else can be done to try and minimise the cost. I'm completely supportive of uplifting that space some way, but not at $300,000. I can't see bang for buck. To your point though, a drop in the ocean in comparison to others. That's why I'm so on the fence. I don't like number 3 though at all, if I'm honest. I don't know if it's, you know, we've got General Holmes Drive, we've got the memorial, and I don't think I think it should be a collaborative approach to, if we're going to name a park, is this person the most deserving? Now, if he is considered the most deserving to name a park, so be it, but I don't think it's something that I'd be comfortably endorsing, you know, in a committee meeting in Botany when we've got such rich and diverse culture, and we've got a lot of discussion and notice of motion recognising our Aboriginal ancestors, caretakers of the land. We do it every single meeting we recognise. So to actually say in a committee meeting we're going to name it after. It's the road he built, or he was in charge of the company that built the road, and he's got him a monument, and now we're going to name a park after this guy who wasn't actually a Rockdale, Botany, Bayside resident. I don't think we're ready for that just yet. It needs to go out and to whoever the appropriate people are to consider the naming conventions, and maybe it's a dual name. We've talked about recognising Aboriginal European culture and history as well. So I'm not quite comfortable with that one, but with the budget, it says the project be incorporated. So, like, I'd be happy to put it there for discussion when we're going through that process, because I wouldn't. I'm not only talking about Ward 1, 2, 3. If that's going to come at the cost of something else, I think at the time we should make a considered decision as if this is the best value, and if it is the best value, great, be endorsed. And if it needs to be, okay, well, you could have this across the road around the corner. That'd be a moment in time. So I'm happy to proceed with 1 and 2. I don't like number 3.
Will be considered then as part of them.
Well, it has to go to the Geographical Names Board anyway, so it's not like it is.
But what I'm saying is I'm not comfortable in going with one name, and that we're going to seek council to endorse Major General William Holmes, where it could be, Greek ancestor. There could be other worthy recipients of a park name. Considering this person has a road and a memorial, so he memorial within this park.
I appreciate
I think
that,
it needs
the
a name.
memorial is there, so it's
Sorry?
the memorial is there and has been for many years, so that's where the connection is. And
Yeah. So I can't support it in its current form, but if we were to going, what's the process, GM? Because we've named roads and parks and things before. What's the appropriate pathway to have a discussion around that?
So yes, we do have a policy on public place naming, and it's a fairly detailed and complicated process whereby council would put forward something for consultation, the community and council would consider, it would come back to council for endorsement to go to the Geographic Names Board. They would then consider it and come back to council with their response, and potentially council would endorse it. So it's a multi-part process and takes up to 12 months to get it through that process.
I think I'd be more comfortable if absolutely Major General Holmes could be included in that list of names for recommendation, but we need to consider other options, and that's what I'm asking. If it turns out through that due process that that's the most appropriate name, and it's all endorsed and the community is happy, so be it. But we can't. I don't like to say we're just going to name a park after this person without really going out too far. So, would you be happy, Councillor Poulos, to go through that leave 1 and 2, but go through the due process of.
I don't want point 3 to be removed, but I'd like it to be.
He can be included, but to go through the process of.
Considering.
Yes, something on those lines, just to go more broadly.
That the open space parcel land be taken to public consultation on an appropriate name. Would that be right?
Maybe GM, you can help. I think you understand the intent. We need to keep Councillor Poulos as there, that he should be considered, but how do we go through that process?
I don't want to sort of at this point mark it as public consultation because, like I said, the memorial exists. It's not like it's not.
Maybe we can get some help with the wording.
It's just for the
It
name.
has to, whatever the proposed name is or names has to go through public consultation. It won't be considered by the Geographic Names Board without that. So I think we should say, consistent with council's public naming policy, that a name for the parcel of land that we're talking about be considered and public consultation be undertaken. Now, this is where you have to decide whether it's only on the name Major General Williams Hold or whether it includes Major General William Holmes Memorial Park as one of the options to be considered.
Well,
Yeah.
I would follow the process, so I wouldn't actually, and I'm not,
I'd
no,
rather-
there's no, I'm not.
We-
I guess I'd rather not name, name him as an option if there aren't also named in there something like Kamei or something.
Yeah, that's right. Our policy would require us to take it to the RAP before we go out for broader public consultation.
I Yeah, I'd become more comfortable if we sort of consistent with the naming place policy and leave it at that, and
Yeah.
then have that put down.
Yeah.
Can we just get that wording tightened up then?
Consistent with the council name place policy.
Councillor, a public consultation.
Council investigate names.
Public place naming policy.
Investigate names, yeah. For the new park. And can we make number 2 instead of being incorporated, be considered for?
No, I wouldn't leave it as incorporated. That's okay.
That'll still go to a vote anyway. It's fine. It's okay. Council investigate names for the new park. It doesn't. We won't go straight to consultation.
Oh, yeah.
Just the council undertake the process in accordance with the public place naming policy.
I think that's
Yes, for the naming.
Including consideration.
No.
Just leave
No,
it as
just
the
Just like
name.
what we're,
That's it.
aren't we taking out? We take out.
Yeah, we're taking out 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought Councillor Poulos wanted to
No,
name
I
it.
wanted it.
Right.
That's what I'm
The
saying.
open parcel land conservation be considered. So considered as my council plan, and then I would remove so that the open space parcel of land to take public consult.
No, we're not going there.
No.
Just forget. Just can I just make it? Forget number 3. Just continue with the new bit. Consistent with the council name for council to undertake the process and process with naming place policy to investigate names for new park to be investigated, including consideration of
Yeah.
Major General Williams. That's what I'm saying, Councillor Poulos, too.
So you keep that as one of the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want that as one of the options to come back,
Correct.
but we want to know what else there is. And then you remove 3, the initial 3.
Well, I wanted to actually the point to have that the open space parcel of land.
I think if we're going to keep moving with this, can I just, yeah, thank you. We only need 1 investigate, maybe the first investigate, not the second investigate in that.
Yeah, we're taking out the first paragraph of 3, I presume.
Yeah, and we're taking out paragraph 3. Thank you. So we're failing on our ability to get out of here in 45 minutes, Councillor Morrissey. Okay, I will chair. So we will draw that to a vote then. Yeah, are we clear? Yes?
We'll wordsmith this one.
Yeah.
Okay. So all those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. Okay, we now move on to CWA 25.033, response to notice of motion, assessment of sports lighting at Borley Park.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll just share my screen. So I'll be presenting the response to the notice of motion, which provides the condition assessment of the lighting at Borley Park, including a recommended approach to improve the lighting for the committee to receive and note. So Borley Park is a district level open space used for both passive and active recreational use. The site includes a playground, which is currently under renewal, a fitness station under construction, a full-size basketball court, cricket practice nets, a memorial garden, 2 rugby league fields, 4 cricket pitches with fields of varying sizes, and a narrow soccer field, sorry. So there are 11 existing towers throughout the perimeter of the Borley Park, which vary in age and condition. Council engaged a qualified lighting consultant to undertake modelling of the existing luminaires. They were assessed against the Australian standards for sport lighting and obtrusive lighting. The results of the modelling concluded that there was sufficient lighting to the rugby league fields for training purposes, so they were found at 50 lux. However, there was insufficient lighting to the soccer field for training purposes, and that was mostly due to the existing placement of the light towers not aligning with the soccer field configuration. There was also insufficient lighting to the basketball court if it was to be used for nighttime purposes. So lighting infrastructure is generally designed to have an asset life of 25 years. All towers showed signs of corrosion and wear due to their age. And it was, replacement was likely to be needed within the next 10 years. So modelling was undertaken based on switching the existing luminaires with LED bulbs. The LEDs did improve lighting to enable training on both the soccer field and the basketball court. However, it did not meet the Australian standards for obtrusive lighting, so it did create greater light spill to nearby properties. And again, it was due to the existing position and heights of the light towers. More significantly, structural certification for the reuse of the towers with LEDs was also very unlikely due to the current state of the towers. So in order to achieve improved lighting outcomes while also reducing adverse impacts to the surrounding residents, the proposed improvement approach is for council to consider a full redesign of the lighting system and tower placements so that they better align with the field configurations. As part of this process, a review of the current field layouts is recommended to ensure we are looking at a holistic solution, so including addressing any existing functionality issues such as the narrow soccer field. Taking this holistic approach will allow for the safe and equitable use of all sporting fields with compliant and fit-for-purpose lighting that aligns with field layouts. We can come back to present the concept plan to committee in the next financial year and advance to a more detailed design with a costing plan aligned to the asset lifestyle following that year. That takes us to our recommendation to receive and note the report.
Great, thank you. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Morrissey, Councillor Kassim, do we have any debate?
Can I ask a question? Is this the park that Councillor Muscat wanted the little walkway round? Oh, okay. So,
The one opposite the pool.
yeah, so that's been incorporated in it? Okay, I just remember asking for that walking track.
No, thanks for the investigation there. Just making sure we're talking to the clubs who are using it, cricket, soccer, etc. Just to, because most clubs will be very have an intimate knowledge of their own fields and what should go where in terms of the layout. So by looking at the lighting plan, that's an opportunity. It could be a radical redesign. It could be something quite minor. So if we just include them. And then if this does get endorsed by council, then maybe even let them know that it's under review now, so they've got something to look forward to. Because if they want to upgrade even further and beyond that, then they might have to raise some funds and things as well. And some clubs do that, so just keep them engaged. Yeah, thanks.
Any further debate? Okay, all those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. So we'll move on to the CWA 25.034 post-exhibition report, proposed off-leash dog park for Linear Park. You'd like to move it, Councillor Kassim? Seconded, Councillor Strong? Did you want to have any, is there a presentation? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we have a presentation. I'll make it fairly quick. If we go to the next page, please, Peter. Just an overview of progress on this project, councillors. In April 24, council resolved to investigate a dog off-leash area in Linear Park. In June last year, Sydney Water requested a formal proposal from council. We provided that to Sydney Water for approval in December. In February of this year, Sydney Water provided approval in principle. We undertook community engagement throughout July, and now we're at committee with the post-engagement report for adoption of the concept plan. This plan shows the location of the proposed dog park directly to the north of Church Avenue in Linear Park, south of Gardeners Road. It's a fully fenced dog off-leash area with 2 entry points. The dimensions are approximately 62 metres by about 13.5 metres, 825 square metres in area, 95 linear metres. And you can see the location there highlighted in green towards the southern portion of that image. The location has, is located away from the main roads and heavy traffic. It avoids areas with the shallow capping layer. It's situated near established screening vegetation to minimise impacts to nearby residents, preserves Sydney Water's maintenance access to the sewer main, centrally located to residents within Mascot, has good passive supervision, and the fencing proposed manages conflicts with pedestrians and cyclists. During the community engagement process, so we exhibited for between 7th and 28th of July on Council's Have Your Say website. It was boosted on social media platforms. We had on-site signage. A direct letter was distributed to immediately adjacent residents, and we also provided notification to petitioners. There was strong community support for the proposal. About 95% of people favoured the proposal. Throughout the community engagement, there were a number of objections, not too many. Some of the objections spoke about noise impacts of the park to adjacent residences, reduced amenity for other park users, and concerns about irresponsible dog ownership in surrounding areas, including increased dog waste and smell. The design response in relation to those objections is noted in the report. In summary, the dog park has been located to minimise disturbance to nearby residences. It is located near existing screening vegetation. The fenced area is small relative to the park. Hang on a sec. And other facilities planned include fitness, shared path and connections. In response to concerns about irresponsible dog ownership, we will have bins and appropriate signage. So the next steps is for council to endorse the final design, submit a permit application to Sydney Water for formal approval, and for the project to proceed through detailed design in the next financial year. Thanks very much.
Okay, do we have any debate?
No debate, really, just if I can. Thank you. I know that there's, as one you can see, what strong resident support there is for this, and I know that a lot of concern for the dangers which their dogs were facing, up to now. So thank you very much for doing that. I noticed one of the responses which you haven't put up there is the one with regard to water for dogs. And that is obviously a good thing for dogs, but I can see that your problem was the contaminated nature of the land. Is it possible to put some sort of water fountains and things on the edge of the park, like maybe on Church Street or something, like just somewhere at one end of it? Are there water services which can be hooked into somehow so that there is water there for the dogs?
Yep. Through your chair, we can have a look at that. We can just check where those water supplies run and whether they're on council land, and we can do Sydney Water land, and we can tap into them.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just quick question. I saw a dog running on grass. This is crushed granite though or something, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks. Just wanted to make sure we haven't changed that because it's going to be muddy. All right, thanks.
No, I was going to say the only other comment I was going to make is when you had your picture, you had the dog park green and the rest less good. I think you should just swap the colours. Brown for the dog park and green for the grass.
That grass grew quickly.
Just that I think the residents need to explain, and the reason it's gravel is it because of the contamination underneath, and that's what the World Council, you're going to have to tell everyone because they're going to expect grass.
Yeah, I know, that's right. But at least if we can put water, the poor dogs do need water.
Okay, so we move to a vote. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare that carried. So we'll move on to CWA 25.035 post-exhibition report Scarborough Park master plan. Now, this is the one I declared a conflict of interest with. I just want to check with the general manager as per an attachment that's there.
Through the chair, we've had a look at the documentation in the attachment and we believe that the conflict of interest that you've put forward is the appropriate one.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Can we have a mover and a seconder for this item, please? Councillor Strong, Councillor Morrissey, and do we have a report? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So this is just a recap on the master plan for Scarborough Park. It's been drafted to guide the future of Scarborough Park. There's a lot of money's been invested in Scarborough over recent years, but this just guides some of the finishing touches, some of the circulation and other things that still need to be finished off in Scarborough Park. At present, the park offers a wide range of opportunities for the community, including sport and less formal activities in there as well as having some endangered ecological communities along the eastern side of it. So the master plan as exhibited, it was broken up into a number of different zones. There are, as I mentioned, there are parts that are more focused on conservation and biodiversity. There's organised sport and there's passive recreation as well in there. The north-south active transport corridor is an important part to try and stitch the park together. There's also a need for people to move east-west as well from schools and neighbourhoods in towards the park. There's exercise circuits and education trails as part of the master plan as well. There is a waterway running through the park, so we have a blue connection through there as well. Tree canopy, vegetation, fauna, habitat are also important factors in the master plan as well. So in terms of some of those components, there is coastal wetland in Scarborough Park as well. Wildlife habitat that needs to be considered. A large amount of it is flood prone, and in fact it operates as a flood storage area in flood events as well that actually protects some of the surrounding residential areas from being inundated. The tide does come up through the waterway that runs through Scarborough. There is a high groundwater table because it is the lowest lying area in that part of Bayside. And there is some susceptibility to future sea level rise as well because of that. There's heritage items, there's historic filling of land, as there is with a lot of our open space areas, and increasing demands for open space and sport in these areas as well to be managed. In terms of sport, there's already a number of different sports that are accommodated in the park, and it's important to retain those going forward. There's a high demand for that type of recreation. So also protecting those facilities, but also recognising that there are some constraints on the park and there's a limited opportunity to expand sporting use given some of the environmental value of the area as well, and also the demand for passive recreation from the community. So looking at connections, this is a large part of the master plan because these haven't been resolved to date through Scarborough. There is a broader connectivity there. You can see the Scarborough Park area that we're looking at in yellow, but it does ultimately connect all the way up to Riverine, and then ultimately it will connect to Wallow Creek. And the M6 active transport corridor that councillors were just briefed on before the meetings is the northern part of what's shown on that diagram. And the Camo Greenway, which council's taking on as a project, is the area that extends south all the way through to the bay. So this sits right in the middle and is an important link in that broader connectivity. It is also consistent with our bike plan and Transport for New South Wales active transport strategy as well. So the master plan seeks to accommodate primary pathways. So these are ones that might be used by people that want to move more quickly through the area, as well as secondary pathways that are more for recreation and some of those cross paths. And some of those could be less formal pathways that actually run through some of the areas with environmental conservation value. They could be gravel paths, not necessarily formalised paths. So a large part of the master plan is really looking at those north, south and east-west connections that will serve different purposes. So through community engagement, we used quite a number of different methods because there are multiple users of Scarborough Park. We used our normal Have Your Say website platform, which was had traffic directed to it through social media and also our written newsletters. There was 2 environmental walks that were held on the site for people that had an interest, particularly in that side of Scarborough Park. 3 pop-up site information sessions, and there was also a meeting of the clubs and regular hires of the sporting and community facilities there to hear their needs and concerns about it. Flyers were delivered through the local neighbourhood, and there were also some information boards on the site. So quite a high level of engagement there, over 4,000 views of that material, 309 online surveys were completed, and 7 written submissions were received. Overall, the feedback was positive. More than 90% of participants supported the draft master plan, with some suggesting some changes. We also had separate discussions with Transport for New South Wales, as they're a key stakeholder in terms of the active transport corridor in particular, and trying to get consistency with their strategies as well. Some of the key feedback we received, adjusting some of the pathways to reduce conflict with sport activities in particular. There's some long-standing issues there with pathways passing by clubhouse buildings and sporting fields. We've listened to that feedback and adjusted the location of some of the primary paths so that we're directing most of the cycle traffic in particular away from those heavily used sporting facilities. So we think we've arrived at a good solution with that. Providing better connection to other nearby attractors like schools and shops and the like, and the foreshore. So being conscious of the movement paths other than the main north-south one, and they've been accommodated with other connections through the park. There were requests for safer crossings also, particularly at Barton Street and the crossing in Tonbridge Street. The plan does look at upgrading some of those crossings, and that's been included in the master plan. The advocacy for wider shared paths or for separating pedestrian and cycle paths. We can accommodate that in some locations, but not all. It's not always feasible to separate them just due to the space that's available. There are limitations to try and work around playing fields, and also through some of the more natural areas, there's trees and their roots and the like that need to be worked around. So we can do separation where it's possible, but that's not always achievable. Advocacy for increased Indigenous tree planting, improved maintenance, including waste collection and weed control. So those planning is covered in the master plan, and some of those more operational things we can look at just in terms of our normal maintenance schedules for these open space areas. There is an endangered Kernell dune forest habitat in there. We had mixed feedback on that. Some people supported the primary path going through there, while others preferred that the environmental value was prioritised there. So we tried to balance that in the master plan by showing the cycle network a route along the western edge of the forest and just a secondary path through the forest so people can go in there and enjoy it, but it won't take the majority of the traffic on that north-south connection. There's also some feedback around flood mitigation, particularly in Scarborough Park Central. It can be quite wet after rain events. That is actually part of its function, to hold stormwater to protect other properties in that area. And if we were to change that to raise the level, for example, then that water would go elsewhere. So we do need to try and achieve a balance there between recreational needs and managing flood water. There was advocacy for more diversity in the recreational use of the area. The revised master plan, we have included some additional small facilities in there, things like table tennis tables, handball and rebound walls. There's not really space to fit major new sporting assets in there because most of the area is already occupied, but some additional recreational opportunities there as well for those who don't participate in organised sport. There was a request that the plan be adjusted so the facilities are added to high use areas and reduce areas that are close to homes where there's high activity. So we have looked to try and reduce the intensity near Hawthorne Reserve in particular, and some of those activities are now proposed closer to Barton Street where the existing playground is, and it's not so close to residents. Requests for additional amenities like drinking fountains and bike-related facilities, rubbish bins and the like. So those items we will look at in the detailed design stages for the park. And requests for signage and wayfinding and the like. Again, those things will be looked at in the detailed design stages, and there'll be further consultation through those parts of the process. So the revised plan does include some adjustments to the alignment of the primary active transport route, and that's to avoid conflict with sporting activities. We think that we've addressed the concerns of some of the sporting groups through doing that. There are some improvements to crossings and connections included in the revised plan as well, taking on board the feedback. We think we've got a good balance between preservation of the ecological assets there and also accommodating active transport through the space at the same time, just by careful selection of the routes of those pathways. We have included some additional facilities in there, as I said, for recreation, and also moved some of that intensity away from existing homes to minimise the disturbance. So overall, the master plan, we feel, has struck a good balance. There is a discussion we need to have with Transport about finalising the connection through to the south there, which will ultimately join onto the Camo Greenway. There is some property that's owned by Transport, and that's the reason why we need to have some discussion with them as to whether we can get access to that. One of the properties has a house on it at the moment, so we need to have some discussion about whether that could be repurposed, or whether council could acquire it, or what the options might be there. So that's a subsequent piece of work that we'll undertake. In terms of delivery, that will happen over time, and as we have financial and delivery capacity to do that. There's probably around $20 million worth of work to be done in there to finish off all the pieces of the master plan that haven't been delivered so far. We can look at that in our new contributions plan, which we've talked about tonight, potentially through VPAs in the future. Some of it is renewal work that could be funded from the renewal levy, the stormwater levy for some parts, other grants, and then collaboration with sporting partners as well. That's it for that one. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion? Well, I just want to say that the public consultation on this has been so thorough and excellent, and it's so nice to hear such positive feedback from the community, and that which has been constructive has been taken on board as well. And I just wanted to mention one thing around that house, that the Transport New South Wales. Like, there is another way. There is a way to, I believe, that you can get in and out there without demolishing a house. So I think I'd urge the staff to walk through that connection and visualise that, just to remove any impediments or any controversy potentially. But it's let's get it done. I want to ride up to Ramsgate Markets on a Saturday morning and have an almond croissant and a latte from my house. It'll take half the time that it takes to get up the waterfront route. So, all right, all those in favour? Aye. Okay, declare that carried. We will, I didn't ask nay. Anyone against? Nope. Good, great, thanks. Let's move on to CWA 25.036, parking management, the Boulevard Car Park, Brighton, Sands. It's a fairly straightforward matter. Do you have a presentation, or should we take it as read?
We do if you'd like it, but up to councillors.
Is any what? Have the presentation. Okay. I guess staff have spent the night waiting patiently.
Chair, we have
Yeah, they have.
Sam Lindsay with us tonight. He's acting manager city infrastructure at the moment. He's going to do some of the presenting tonight.
Thank you.
I better share that first too. Sorry. Okay.
Great, thank you. Just this. Look, as we're probably all aware of the Boulevard car park and where it is. In March last year, there was a notice of motion with various components to it, one of which was a request to investigate the increase of parking availability in the short term. as well as looking at long-term solutions for the Boulevard car park. Later in June, Council adopted a recommendation to implement 3-hour parking limits throughout the entire car park. Previously, the ground floor level and the first level had a 3-hour parking limit that applied from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And this was extended onto the rooftop. This new signage was then installed in February of this year. Following on from that, there was bollards installed along the surrounds of the ground floor level, and an LPR license plate recognition system has now been installed on the entry and exit points to that car park in June. During this time, when the signage changes were rolled out, councils received a request to review the implemented signage changes to accommodate the needs of the RSL club next door. So obviously, as part of the initial assessment, there's been multiple investigations conducted. The rooftop was surveyed prior to the restrictions being implemented, so when it was unrestricted. It was noted that during this time, there was between 26 to 28 vehicles regularly occupying the space during the daytime and 12 to 14 vehicles staying there overnight. Restrictions were then proposed for the car park so it could more effectively cater to the needs of the customers and support local businesses in the precinct. An 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. restriction allows for residents and workers to enter the car park after 8 p.m. and park overnight, providing that they leave prior to 8 a.m. the following morning. When this was initially surveyed, Hercules Road, Duke Street and Gordon Street, Bruce Street were all identified as nearby locations with unrestricted parking. So obviously the current request from the RSL is for the time limits to be adjusted so that the employees who finish later can park in close proximity to the RSL. This was requested for safety reasons. By changing the time limit to allow for longer stay parking to commence before 8 p.m. Could potentially be a risk, opening the opportunity for residents and other local workers to park in this space, effectively eliminating the intention for the original parking to be installed. This will also undermine the objectives that we want to support local business in the area. The RSL could consider other parking options such as subsidised staff travel, parking arrangements or nearby private properties, or implementing a system where they escort staff to vehicles. So it's recommended, based on that, that we keep it the way it is. Thank you, councillors.
So Councillor Barlow and Councillor Strong just moved that. The only discussion I would have is I agree with the officer's recommendation, and I've been actually pleasantly surprised at the lack of any community pushback against this initiative. I think it's been very successful, so a good solution all round so far. Yeah. Okay, all those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you for your presentation and spending the night with us. CWA 25.037, the Mascot Precinct Local Area Traffic Management Study Recommendations and Implementation. Do we have a mover, Councillor Kassim? Second, Councillor Morrissey? I'm imagining we do have a long presentation for this one.
It's not too long, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
With the eye on the time, I'll try and be quick. Okay, so this slide shows the study area. So it's essentially the core area around Mascot Station, looking at that sort of redeveloped precinct there. There's been a number of changes over recent years there with around the railway station and the second entry being constructed there. The area was sort of disrupted for a long period of time, and so this study had been put off for a time until things had sort of settled into the current normal. And now we're looking at ways that we can sort of optimise movement through this area. So there's the study is attached and it's quite long. I won't go through all of it, but there are 18 main recommendations in there that vary in scope and cost and time frame to implement. Some are quite simple and some of them are quite would be quite expensive and time consuming. So the total estimated cost is around $10 million to do it all. And we would look for funding for some of those pieces of infrastructure, particularly traffic signals and the like. and items like traffic signals would require approval from transport, and those times can be fairly lengthy. So we've divided the recommendations into three categories: short, medium, and long term. 1 to 3, 3 to 6, and 6+ years, just to make them more manageable and to sort of manage expectations about how long some of these things may take. All of these recommendations would be reported back to the Traffic Forum, which is a replacement for the Traffic Committee, which will come into in a report very soon. And so there'd be further investigation, design, and then stakeholder and community consultation as well. So they're just high-level recommendations out of a study at this point, and they need some further design work just to be sure that they're going to be successful. So the short-term actions, 1 to 3 years. This links in also with Linear Park, the dog park, and other considerations council's had around there. So looking at Burke Street, so some wayfinding improvements near the station, fairly easy. On Church Avenue, a raised pedestrian crossing at Linear Park to connect the two parts of the park together there to make it easier to get across the road. And the same at John Street to connect Linear Park there also with a raised pedestrian crossing. Some other quicker wins, Church Avenue to change the separated cycling facility to cyclists only. So this essentially means from a point on the road there, the recommendation was that we have an area that's just dedicated to cyclists and we keep the pedestrians on the footpath just to make the flow a little easier and a little safer there. On Church Avenue, that diagram on the bottom with the two purple lines on it, installing some speed cushions there. So they're those sort of rubberised speed humps to help manage vehicle speeds in that area. The study found that was potentially a problem there. Medium term, so in the 3 to 6 year time frame, Church Avenue and Muller Lane, a raised intersection there, narrowing of the lanes, a pedestrian crossing and removal of the existing crossing. So aimed at calming traffic there and also making it easier for pedestrians to get across that intersection. Church Avenue, extension of the cycle path east beyond Burke Street. It currently stops at Burke Street, so continuing the same sort of treatment all the way further to the east. Burke and Coward Street, looking at a signalised crossing there, signalised intersection with a pedestrian leg. Reardon Street and Gardeners Road, addition of a signalised pedestrian leg there as well. So both of those traffic signal matters are matters that we'll have to work with Transport for New South Wales on, or they're currently investigating. Longer term, so Burke Street, removal of the pedestrian crossing at the station, now that the underpass is there with a new station entry, but also looking at signalising the intersection of Burke and John Street as well, so pedestrians could also cross there. And similarly at the other end, looking to signalise the intersection of Burke and Church Avenue as well. So you'd have two signalised intersections there either side of the railway station, which would then obviously have to be carefully synchronised, and also some changes to the bus stop arrangements in that on that stretch as well. Quite a lot going on there. There were temporary signals in place at John Street during the construction of the railway entry, and there were calls at the time for those to remain, and so this study has found that there would be benefit in having signals at that intersection as well. Reardon and Church Street, Church Avenue, looking at a signalised crossing there as well. As these areas become busier, there's efficiency and safety gains to be made by signalising some of these intersections. That's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion? Councillor Morrissey?
I was just going to say it's quite radical. I think I think it's fantastic this long-term plan. Where the crossing is, where the railway is, just close it, right? and work around directing traffic around that. So and maybe buses only. A classic example, Westfield Bondi Junction, where it goes between the Westfield. That's only buses, and it's very pedestrian friendly. The bus drivers are professional. There's no traffic problems in that part, which is really high pedestrian. So absolutely respect the work and everything that's done. I know that's a radical thing. It's like saying, oh, close Bay Street. Well, but similar there, that since the precinct has grown and developed around the station, just take the cars out of the middle of it and move them around the outside, focus that, So that can be a 10-year plus vision, but that's my input, and thank you.
Councillor Kasim.
Yeah. Look, thank you. So I know how much work this was, guys, and yeah, great to have divided it into the short, medium, long term. I think that was a good decision made. I guess I'm interested in how this is like next steps on this, and how we can at least talk to the local residents about at least stage one. There's probably no point talking too much about the rest because it's just so much. But at least stage one. What's the process for that at this point?
Through your chair, we could look to publicise some of this just through the the newsletters and social media posts and that sort of thing, so that people are aware that the study's done and what's coming up in the next 3 years. There would be consultation on perhaps not really minor things like some signage changes, but the other things, there'd be individual consultation on each project as they come through. They'll go through the traffic forum and up to council, and there'll be consultation as part of that process as well. But if you're looking just for some overall sort of communication that the study's finished and what some of the upcoming works would be, we could look to some of those regular channels that we use.
Okay. All right, and I know that there is concern. I'm sort of with Councillor Morrissey in the sense that that's where all the complaints are really about Burke Street. Like what is the consultation with people around that? That's for the long term then. Like what is the process for involving local people in thinking about Burke Street?
In terms of closing it?
Well,
we would need to model that. It is a quite complex kind of traffic environment in there, and as you know, it's kind of hard to get in and hard to get out sometimes if there's one-way streets and no right turns and that sort of thing in there. So to close Burke Street, it's a fairly major link through there. Sam might be able to talk more on that, but I think we'd have to have a very close look at that because it might cause chaos.
yeah.
I don't know whether you got any.
Yeah, if we were to potentially close Burke Street, it would be an entirely new traffic model type of yeah, but the displacement of traffic to the
Like my
broader
trams
network
down
and
Princess Highway idea.
yeah, the broader network in that area obviously being the state road network as well. So then we've got to engage with transport, and I'm sure they'll be happy that we're putting more cars on their roads. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, look, thank you, and yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Just one comment from me, like with the recommendations, you mentioned that they'll be going to the new transport forum. Could they also go to the new walking and cycling committee as they go through?
Yeah, I think the terms of reference are due to come to council shortly, so that might be an opportunity to make sure that these things would go there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other discussion, councillors? No? All those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare that carried. So on to CWA 25.038, Transport for New South Wales, changes to authorisation and delegations to council. Do we need a mover and a seconder for this item? Yes. Okay, Councillor Barlow. Councillor Kasim, would you like to second that? Okay, and then we have a presentation, it looks like, from the General Manager.
Yeah.
Nope,
Back to
Sam.
me. Sorry, councillors. Yeah, so obviously we just kind of previously alluded to in the last report. There's been some changes to the previous delegations from Transport for New South Wales. So currently under the Road Transport Act and the Roads Act, Transport for New South Wales delegate their powers to councils to use prescribed traffic control devices to regulate traffic. Prescribed traffic control device is anything from signs and line markings to physical infrastructure, which could be roundabouts, speed humps, and the like. So these previous delegations were elected council only and required a referral of items via the traffic committee prior to a decision being made at council. The new delegations came into effect on the 1st of August, as revoked those delegations and replaced them with the new Transport 2025 authorisation and delegation instrument. The focus on the new instrument from Transport is to increase the discretion for councils and ideally improve the speed of decisions and actions at a decision-making officer level, hopefully reducing an administrative burden on councils. So the main change, the local traffic committee won't exist moving forward. It'll be renamed to the Local Transport Forum. It's to reflect its new, less formal function. The new LTF will consist of the same core members, so council, police, state members, and the police, sorry, and also the addition of bus operators. So they'll be added into it only when matters affect bus routes and operation. The key component that Transport have been keen to emphasise is there will be no formal voting at the committee, at the forum. Therefore, that's why it doesn't act as a committee. There'll be no approvals and there will be no decisions made at the forum. However, the forum will provide recommendations and assistance to council. So there are a few items that are still required mandatory to be referred through the forum. So these are proposals that restrict, prohibit passage or compel prevent turns for longer than 6 months. So that means things like if we wanted to convert a road to one way, put in a no right turn restriction or no left turn, that's obviously going to be more than 6 months. That's still mandatory. And proposals for longer than 24 hours would hinder safe, efficient operation of a passenger service, so a detour to a bus route, prevent access to a public transport station, stop, and render less effective any bus priority measure. So effectively any road closures that would be in operation for more than 24 hours. For most proposals, referral to the LTF is now at our council's discretion. So previously touched on prescribed traffic control device and what that is. So effectively, the best way to think of a prescribed traffic control device is if you can be fined for it under the road rules, it's a prescribed traffic control device. Other traffic control devices, what direct and warrant traffic, it's not associated with a penalty. So warning signs, things saying curves ahead, bends in the road, slippery when wet, all those kind of things. They're traffic control device, but they're not prescribed under the Act. So council's now able to install and change prescribed traffic control devices without seeking advice from the Traffic Committee or the Transport Forum, and the authority to do so can be delegated to council officers. Council must provide a list of prescribed traffic control devices that are approved to the LTF for information at each meeting. So on a monthly basis, whatever's been endorsed by council officers still must be reported back. Transport for New South Wales have the opportunity to issue a statement of concern for any matters raised. So key changes. The local traffic committee will be changed to the local transport forum. In most cases, council can manage their road network, including for events, without prior referral to the forum. Councils can delegate functions to staff now. Traffic management plans for events, road closures and the like are no longer a requirement to go to the LTF. Previously, there was a regional traffic committee that was run by Transport for New South Wales. This has now been discontinued. Restrictions relating to roads adjacent to nominated train stations. So previously, there was a number of controls for train stations such as Rockdale train station that had to be referred to Transport prior to being referred to the traffic committee. That's now been eliminated to streamline the process. There's simplified rules for portable traffic control lights and roadwork speed limits, and pre-approvals or advance expressions of support are not required from council in order to refer items to the LTF. So as part of the proposed delegations, we're proposing that many items will still be reported to the LTF as they were previously to the local traffic committee. There is a flow chart included in the report which kind of documents Transport for New South Wales new process for the authorised delegation or function. The current practice at Bayside for any change proposed in the road environment, so anything that comes through that would normally go to Traffic Committee, is always subject to community consultation for feedback, or a notification is at least provided in advance for minor changes. We will still be continuing this practice. It's also recommended the arrangement for delegation of authority to the General Manager and a list of matters that would be referred to the LTF and then decided by the Council at the Council meeting. So kind of running through here what's proposed to be delegated to the General Manager. So matters that we would consider high volume in terms of requests, however they're considered low impact, typically of little interest to the community, so that these approvals and implementations can occur quicker and more efficiently. So things such as signage changes and line marking that reinforce existing restrictions. For example, things like 10-metre no stopping zones near corners. Bus zones are already restricted under the road rules, so formalising that signage could be delegated. Work zones for construction sites could also be delegated. Signs and line marking, which is a requirement of a development consent, so it's already been through a DA approval process, so referral back to a committee's kind of a double handling in most instances. Adjustments to existing time parking, so such as moving a signpost a few metres, or potentially when businesses request a change from a 2-hour parking limit to a 1-hour parking limit. That could be done without referral. Events that occur in the public space that are under the duration of 24 hours, as per the requirements of the LTF, could be delegated to staff for approval. And the new intersection traffic control, so such as formalising intersections with give-way restrictions, stop signs, and the like. There's quite a long list, but obviously these are kind of matters that always come up at Traffic Committee, and it's still proposed to refer these items to the Transport Forum for an ultimate determination by Council. So there's things such as accessible parking spaces, disabled parking holder type areas. If we're implementing new time-limited parking restrictions, any new no stopping zones, no parking zones, not under the existing road rules. So if it's kind of mid-block rather than at an intersection, new loading zones, any hard infrastructure. So obviously we mentioned roundabouts, speed humps, pedestrian refuges, etc. Any matters where we receive any more than 5 objections as part of the community consultation process that we would undertake. Any requests made by councillors or that are received via a notice of motion. Any proposed resident parking schemes, any requests for car share spaces, electrical vehicle charging, or other proposed exclusive commercial use of parking spaces, events that last for more than 24 hours, and then effectively anything that we get that is non-typical or is kind of a first of its kind in our LGA. Anything that's going to exceed anything over 6 months in duration. So as we mentioned, one-way changes, right turn bans will still be referred. Anything that is going to require changes to public transport for more than 24 hours and gets the get out of jail free card is the any other matter not listed above. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion on this matter?
I just have one question. How would the new arrangement function with the GM's delegation for matters like, for council-hosted events that might require a one-day road closure, like Saturday markets in Bay Street or New Year's fireworks?
Chair, Bay Street is not a local road, so obviously that's not able to be delegated.
Where it is a local road, what's the process there?
So what this allows is that instead of an application going to the committee or the forum now. The event organiser would still have to do a traffic management plan, but that would then be assessed and delegated. The decision would be delegated to the staff as to whether the traffic management plan was sufficient to make that event a safe event.
Sorry, can I also add on that? Everything is at the discretion of council officers. So even if it is less than 24 hours and we decide it meets a threshold where we still want to refer it through the forum to council, we can still do that.
As it's not a voting matter at the forum, how does decisions get made?
Yeah. Report is still.
So does that mean that we're, rather than just passing the whole local traffic committee papers, we then have to go through and pass every item on the local traffic? No.
No, it'll be the same.
Yeah, the report that comes to council would look pretty similar to the traffic committee minutes at the moment.
Okay.
And yeah, and I'm about to say, like, at the moment, we don't do too much voting anyway. It's usually by consensus and it's discussion. So I think this is all very sensible. If it reduces the number of, no stopping, etc. I mean, some of the very de rigueur things we get at traffic committee, I think it's a good thing. And the main thing is that where there's objections, I note that, or, more than 5, it'll come to us anyway. So I'm relaxed. Thank you. Thank you for working through the detail of it.
Well, that's good to hear. Do we have any further discussion? No? All those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare that carried. We now move on to a confidential item. Councillors, would you like to move into closed session to discuss the report, or would you like to consider the office recommendation in open session, bearing in mind any comments from the report officer and councillors would be limited to those for an open session report?
I'm happy to remain open unless there's queries.
Open seems to be the general consensus.
Unless
Okay.
any councillors have queries, but the report's quite detailed in its intent.
Yep. So so do we have a mover and a seconder for this item? Councillor Morrissey, Councillor Strong. Do we have a presentation?
I'm happy with the report as it's written.
Yeah, I wanted to see the presentation, but can we? It's very exciting. Okay. Okay. So Councillor Kassim and Councillor Douglas move into confidential session. Thank you.
I'm sure they'll be very happy.
Yeah.